All right, we are now live. All right, so hello, everyone who's not here yet because I'm a very small timer. This is Jason Blackmore. He is a right-winger.
Yep. How are we all doing today?
Great. Let me just mute it. Okay, awesome. Now, I'm still hearing something.
Yeah, I'm typing at the minute.
No, I'm hearing my voice. Jesus Christ.
Hang on just a second. Let me see if I can just do... Is that better?
It might be your computer, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, for some reason, my headphones don't want to go into my thing at the minute. So let me just...
No, it's...
Let me just be a boomer
Which
for a
didn't
second
mute
and
for some
realise
reason.
that
No.
my
me.
laptop doesn't actually want to take it. But, sorry, my microphone didn't want to take the headphones, but the laptop should do, right?
Yeah, right? It should be just fine. It
The ones
works
that
on my
I
screen
should be able
now.
to hear
Are you
you
good?
properly now. Yeah. Can you hear me?
All right. Yes, I can hear you. You can hear me. That was crazy. Anyway,
moment from a boomerish guy.
Yeah, from two boomerish individuals, one of which is a coomer because I have dyed hair. Anyway, so all right. So anyway, so we're starting out because I am an ANCOM. You are a sort of a right winger, but you believe in a mixed economy. You're not a total like a libertarian, as it were. Correct?
Yeah, correct. No, I would be against both ideologies simply because I believe humanity does need a form of hierarchy. Some people would say that we don't, but those are just my beliefs. And I think the best way of dealing with that at the minute is a government. But hey ho.
Hey, well, I mean, anarchism isn't entirely without hierarchy. It is simply just all hierarchy should be self-evidently justified. So if you believe that a government is self-evidently justifiable, then it's there. However, most anarchists don't like a state of any kind. They do like democracy, though, and they could. There is such thing as council anarchism, council communism, and all those things. So I don't think that you would be terribly out of touch if you were to I don't know, if we were to live in an anarchistic society. I don't think you would totally hate it. But you do believe in the necessity of capitalism, though, right? Or no?
No, I'm just thinking. Rather, because the question in itself is a very intriguing question. When you say, do we need capitalism? Do you mean how we have capitalism as it is at this minute? Or do you mean how we trade and how it's supposed to be done? As in, one person versus one person, so to speak.
Private property. That can be.
No, I am definitely for private property. Yes, I am definitely for private property.
Are you familiar with the difference between private and personal property?
I am familiar with the definition that you guys are going to give as the difference, but yes, please go ahead and give it just in case somebody doesn't know.
Well, private property is business property used for profit and making money, whereas personal property would be like your house, your toothbrush, your television, and stuff like that. No one wants to come and take away that stuff, but as a leftist anarchist, I am not a fan of private property.
Sure. Sure. In that quick case, then, I do. I love private property. I love being able to decide that if I buy a car and if I pass a licensing test for it, that I can then go out on my own and decide that I'm going to, for instance, drive you to the airport every other day because that's what you want. If I wasn't able to have private property, I wouldn't be able to turn that into a business and have my own disposable income.
That's true. You wouldn't be able to do that for a business, but surely your friends, I mean, if you're doing it for your friends, I mean, you don't necessarily need to profit off of it, but
Sure, if you're doing it for your friends, but I'm not trying to do it for my friends. That's why I said I would do it. I would do it for you, or do it for other people, acquaintances, somebody that you do know, but you'd still charge them for it, right?
Yeah, right. Fair enough. But I mean, even today, though, well, then again, maybe this is an important discussion, but even today, you wouldn't even really own that business. You'd probably do it through Uber or Lyft or through a taxi service, which you wouldn't probably own yourself. So, I mean, Is it even really that much better?
Well, it depends. You could always buy into the franchise and then have the point of the franchise help you get a leg up, so to speak, or get your license in. For instance, if I take from and draw from my own experience from the UK perspective, for instance, you can do a license test, which is called a PVC test, or a PVC test, which is a private vehicle company license test, which means that you can go out of your way to be able to be your own company, be your own private taxi company. So you can go out of your way to actually get that yourself and run it by yourself.
How much does that cost? What's the upstart?
I believe it. I haven't checked for a while, so this is an estimate, but I can't think there is any more than 250, 280. But again, that is an estimate. I haven't checked. But I suppose I could do that.
And is that a lot? Because I know that would obviously be in pounds.
Well, it's a lot less than what most people would get in a monthly wage. So say for a monthly wage, most people would be getting after tax, between £800 and 1,200 as an average income for an average worker. Now, that does vary. You can get less, you can get more, but as an average, it's between 800 and 1,200 as an average. So you could quite easily pay for that out of 1 month's wages in a place that you don't want to work at, or the franchise that you've just worked at, for instance.
Okay, well, that's actually interesting. I think it is important to note because you are from Britain, England, and the UK. I guess the UK. I don't know which part would be Britain.
I'm from England, but Britain is absolutely fine.
Okay, Britain, England. From that part of the world, you guys actually have a lot more of a mixed economy, which is sort of what you want anyway. It's not super mixed, but you do have obviously the NHS and things like that. And also, I don't think we can do that. I don't think in America we could legally just become a taxi. Actually, it might be possible, but certainly in America, a lot more people would do it through Uber or Lyft, because I guess it would become a lot easier anyway, because there'd be an app. How do people get a hold of you?
Well, a hold of me. They can
if you were to drive your taxi, your personal vehicle taxi.
Oh, you can do that via advertising. For instance, you can do Facebook advertising. You can do your local radio advertising, TV advertising. You know, that's what advertising's for. You could also, as you quite rightly said, create your own app. Now, don't get me wrong, that's going to be a bit expensive if you're on your own. But if you start building some stuff, you've got a way forward.
That is okay. So do you? Okay, so it wouldn't be. There's not like a ready-made service provided by the government that allows one to become part of that sort of fleet of vehicles, right? You would have to, like you said, advertise it yourself or make an app yourself or something.
I don't understand the framing of the question. Do you mean that the government wouldn't help you be able to set up a business or advertise it? Or I don't understand the framing.
Well, my question was, Well, okay, like you said, if you were to get the license that allows you to drive other people around as a taxi or make money off of it, what exactly does that license do? Is that different than a regular old driver's license?
Yeah, much different. Yes, it means that you're. It's like a very high proficiency test. It means that you know the quickest areas of being able to get around. You know safety precautions. You're trained in some form of health-related systems. I can't remember what they called it. Oh Jesus, I can't remember what it's called. Well, the basic health things, you know, where you do your compressions and things like that. I can't remember what CPR.
Oh, cool. That's an interesting.
Your basic.
I like that.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, you're also trained in basic how to deal with the fits as well. So you're trained quite a lot in that. It's not just a case of being like a black cab taxi or a London taxi, depending on how you want to call it. Where you just have to know the areas in which you're going. There's a lot more that goes into a PVC license than there is in a black cab license.
That's interesting. I would actually like to talk more about that, but that's not really the discussion that we came here for. but that's very interesting. I had no idea about any of that. But yeah. So you are a fan of private property, and so you want, and you also like money too, because communism is a classless and moneyless society, which is what I think would be the ideal.
Sure.
And so what is there something? What is it about? I mean, why do you like wages and private property? I mean, if I may point blank just ask.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's a pertinent question, especially for somebody that's supposed to be, I suppose, defending that sort of system. The thing is with a wage is that you can go to a job and understand what you're going to get paid for. So if you start applying for a job and know that you're going to get paid £7 an hour or $9 an hour, whatever the currency rate is, and you could then go, well, that's not good enough for what I want, where I want a bigger house, I want this and I want that. 9 times out of 10, you can work your way up to being able to get a better wage. You can work out your monthly outgoings and your monthly ingoings and work out how you're going to be able to, sustain your life, for instance. I think that that's a lot better system, because generally I like to presume that humanity and humans are able to, generally look after themselves and work out that if you've got a $500 rent and you're only making $450 in, wage, you're probably not going to be able to pay your goddamn rent. So you might want to get a better job or move somewhere that's a bit, less. Now, I know that sounds heartless, but, you can quite easily work out where you're going and what you're doing.
My question would be what is the benefit of having rent cost money and food and what is the benefit of, because I presume the answer would be so that people work, but I don't.
No. Yeah. The answer wouldn't be the answer wouldn't be because they need to work. For instance, if you have rent, then you know what the property is going to be valued for. You know that how you're going to be able to afford that property. For instance, if you are able to take out a mortgage and you know that the mortgage is going to be $300 and something dollars a month, you know that you can afford to take out that mortgage. You can then buy that property. If it's $500 and you only make $450 again, you can't.
Okay, but what about in the instance of an economic crash and you get laid off?
Then unfortunately, that's due to unforeseen circumstances. Most people that go into, say, for instance, using the mortgage again, will go into the understanding or contractual agreements of saying, as long as nothing changes, I'm willing to be able to pay this, and I'm willing to be able to pay it for this amount of time, seeing that nothing changes in the future, for instance.
Okay, but also you are more mixed anyway, so you would believe that if somebody were to lose their job, they shouldn't then immediately become homeless anyway.
No,
right?
I agree. No. Yeah. Completely not agree. I believe in the social safety net. That's the reason why we do have governments. That's the reason why the governments are there, to make sure that when society starts to flounder, so to speak, or starts to stumble, it's there to give a hand to help it back up again.
Okay. And so what about basic income? How do you feel about that?
You mean universal basic income?
Universal basic income, yeah.
It depends. It depends on how it's funded. If it's just funded via taxes and how it's done at this moment in time, especially from a US perspective, for instance, then I'm not for it. If it's to do with a subsidizement of, say, for instance, looking into the future of automation that's coming into place, then I believe that for every company that lays off a person due to automation, then it should at least have to pay half of those wages in taxes, because you're still saving money anyway.
Yes, that is true. You would still be saving money, and ultimately you'd come down to half. But then, but simply paying half the wages, I suppose the profit that you generate would be much more superior, because again, this automation could work potentially 24 hours a day for several months at a time.
Exactly.
So even paying just half the wages would be much less than you could potentially get. But it seems that
the reason why I say half is because that's generally where statutory sick pay comes into place. It generally goes to about half of what you would earn. So for me, UBI would be able to go as half of what you earn, as universal basic income can go into a single ring post tax, and then be able to be distributed out throughout the whole of the tax system via, as you quite rightly said before, like a dole system.
Is England currently at war? Is the UK?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. That's what I was going to say. In America, because we're so incredibly pumping money and like trillions of dollars into war, I think that we could just tone that down a lot, and then we could solve a lot of these issues, because a lot of people are like, where does the money come from? But I mean, we a lot of times we spend money just we even create jets that we don't use, and we just put them in the desert just to keep people working, because we have a military contract to do that, which is just incredibly ridiculous to me. That
wasteful.
Makes absolutely no.
Yeah,
so I'm glad that you. Yeah, that is. What might convince you to move to full on communism and get rid
Private
of private
property.
property. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my bit. Private property.
So you like the idea of potentially, I mean, I don't know, perhaps you even do this now, owning a business or something and making money off of it. You really like that idea?
I like being able to be in control of myself. That if I want to go and take a holiday, regardless of what time of the year it is, that I can go and take a holiday regardless of what time of the year is, and I don't have to ask anybody for that thing. Even if I'm in work, I can give it 4 to 5 weeks notice, and then say, "Look, I'm going on holiday." And generally, most places pay you holiday pay. I love that system.
I don't see how that is. I mean, I don't see how you wouldn't be able to do that under anarchism or anarcho-communism. Like, I don't. I mean, because really, though, I mean, we would try to push automation as soon as possible to make work as like voluntary as possible and non-mandatory.
Sure.
I don't know what the word would be. And then you would be able to take a vacation anytime. So I don't see
quick
why. I
thought
don't see.
experiment for you then. Yeah, no, quick thought experiment for you then. Say, for instance, that everybody generally wants to go on holiday between August and September, you know, getting past the holidays and school holidays and whatnot. So if you have a system where, in fact, you don't have any monetary value to where you want to go, and everybody wants to go to the Maldives, for instance, because, you know, it's an amazing place, or anywhere that you feel is the best place in the world for you, just have that in your head. How are you going to be able to decide how many people are able to get there? How are you going to decide how many people are being able to stay there? Because the thing is with value is it doesn't just come down to who can afford it. It also comes down to how many places that they actually have for you to be able to get into it. And that value goes with how many places they have.
So you're presuming that, let's say you said the Maldives, an example in America is Disney World. Everybody wants to go to Disney World at the same time, basically. And then how do you do that? Well, I mean, I don't know where the Maldives is. Is that in Spain? Where is that?
As far as I'm aware, it's off the coast of Madagascar, as far as I'm aware,
Madagascar.
But I could be wrong.
Okay, so those places are in the tropics, right? So
yes,
that's a warm place that people want to go to. So typically they'd probably want to go in the winter and not the summer. But it just seems unlikely that everybody would want to go at once. And if everybody's going and everybody could go at the same time, potentially, I don't think everybody would, or you would maybe, you're right, you want to go right now, right? So I feel like you want to go right now, but I feel like other people might be willing to wait to a more opportune time when there's less people there. And then once it becomes like normalized, then there's people coming and going all the time. I feel like it would constantly have a state. Maybe there would be bumps of like spikes of people during certain times of year, but I don't see it becoming overcrowded in the way that you're presuming it would.
So how do you explain how and why people are willing to pay extortionate prices at the minute to be able to go at the same time as they want to when it's hot, for instance, between June and August?
Okay, so they want to go during the summer. Okay, so I was predicting a different time of year anyway. But then again, my tastes are different. I would probably want to go in the winter when it's cold where I am and it's warm over there. So there's another example right there. But the answer is, why would people want to go why are they spending so much money to go now? Probably because of advertising. And I mean, it does. And I mean, obviously travel is expensive and things like that. And people have enormous hotels there. Also, I imagine people probably go in the summer because a lot of children are off school during the summer. And so that's why a lot of vacations happen during the summer anyway, because that's when families, you know, they don't have to worry about their child missing school. And then they can take some time off work, and then they go at that time. Now, that's not everybody, but that would be an example for, I mean, especially Disneyland and Disney World, because, you know, that's a both adult and child focused, but it is very child focused as well. So they definitely get a lot during the summer. So I think that it perhaps is just that people equate summer with vacation because of perhaps advertising and travel agencies that you know, they you know, you think of vacation, you think of relaxing on the beach. I mean, that is not everybody's idea of vacation, A, but B, I think it is a lot of people's idea of vacation because of advertising and because of, capitalism and people trying to do that. Seasonal travel can be very profitable in that way. If you
of course it can. No, of course it can. But
yeah,
I suppose let me just put it this way to you. From what I have just heard from you, and I'm not trying to be any sort of create a straw man whatsoever. I'm actually trying to still man your position rather than trying to straw man it.
I appreciate that.
But from what you've just said to me, no problem. From what you've just said to me, and from my understanding of it, you're saying that capitalism in itself has made people decide that staying on the beach is a good idea because of advertising.
No, not entirely. Yeah. I'll let you finish though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but
that's where I was coming from the understanding of what you just said. You're saying that due to the fact of advertising and the fact of it being people choosing to go into the summer, people choosing to be able to go to beach holidays, for instance.
Don't forget school times.
No, I agree. I agree. Let me throw a little spanner into the works.
Okay.
Would you still have school set semesters, or would you change it so anybody can do anything what they want with schools, or what would you do on that one?
I would probably vote for a system that had school year round and you kind of could just come and go, kind of like how college is. There would be semesters and you could come and go. So you could go during the summer if you wanted to, or you could go during the normal times if you wanted to, because I think even studies show that having a huge, like the 2 months of summer vacation causes, students to flow, like sort of go out of the flow of education. And I've seen, I don't know what countries do it, but I believe it is in the sort of Nordic regions where they do a sort of 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off kind of a thing. So they do 2 weeks of school, 2 weeks of vacation, 2 weeks of school, it might be 2 and 1, I'm not sure, but they do that where they never have a long period and it's just a constant cycle. And they do a lot better academically as a result. And so I also don't think, I don't think school should be compulsory after a certain age either, because a lot of times the reason that school is compulsory right now is to babysit most of the time. I mean, obviously it's to educate the children a little bit, but at least somewhat, I would hope. But it is mostly, I mean, that's why in America, we're having this huge friggin' this huge dispute over, I mean, well, it's kind of been resolved. Kids are going back to school. But I mean, with the whole virus right now,
Sure.
It's like, they didn't want to send them back to school. They wanted to keep them there. But the reason that they want to send them to school is because the parents most of the time need to go to work and they can't leave the kids unattended because they can't afford a babysitter. And it just seems like all of this stuff is a result of capitalism and private property and the need to use money in order to facilitate, society. And I just think it's all
very quickly before you carry on. With what you've just said there, you're from, again, trying to still man it from my understanding. Again, I could be wrong. It seems to me that you're trying to state, or at least push, that the reason why people want to go back to school. Now, don't get me wrong, there's always two sides of every argument and everything else like that. And I get that, and I'm not actually taking a position either way. I don't know enough to be able to say whether they should go back to school or whether they shouldn't. So I don't know.
I appreciate you're being very precise with your words, but don't worry too much. You can just say what you need to say.
But all I would say to that is I don't think that anybody is going down the argumentation of what you just put forward, which is people saying that, the reason why we want children to go back to school is because we want them to go back to, in your words, being a daycare center.
That is actually that is what's being said.
By who?
That is by I don't know by who specifically, but I've heard that was the big thing, that's why they want. I mean, obviously, our current administration also just wants to not admit that anything is ever wrong ever. So they just want to say that, oh, it's fine, go back to school, you don't need to wear a mask, you can go to work, all this good crap, which is just completely ridiculous to me. But a big reason that that school is the hours that it is. I mean, I'm sure you've heard that students, especially in high school, should sleep in longer and shouldn't go to school as early as they do. I don't actually know how it works in the UK. I'm not entirely familiar with it. But in America, we have to get up and be at school by between like 6:30 and 7:30. And
yeah, that's way too early. Ours is 9.
Yeah. Okay, good. So you guys are even better off anyway. Jesus. So we do that, and it's been shown in the studies that if you go in at 9 or later or something like that, that the students do a lot better academically. But the reason we continue to do that is so that that parents can go to work and they don't need to have a babysitter to watch their child at home. Because there's been tons of studies. I haven't fixed it.
See,
I'm done.
Yeah, no worries. See, for me, I don't see how you can make the leap from what you've just said about correct things about how things should be different, especially going in from like 6:30, 7 o'clock and things like that. If that's what the case, then I don't see how you can get from the leap of that for them then going, well, they just want their children to be put in for a daycare center anyway. I mean, don't see where that leap comes from.
Only reason. But that is, I mean, especially for younger kids, that's a main reason. I mean, obviously they go to school to learn. That is the number one thing.
Sure.
But the benefit of it is in the wage labor system where parents are spending 9 or 8 or 9 hours a day at work, potentially even longer with working at home and stuff like that, but spending the most of their day at work, they can't watch their younger children, and perhaps they just don't want to they don't want a babysitter, and so it works like mutually beneficial sort of relationship where school gets to watch the children for 6 to 7 to 8 hours a day, and then they come home around the same time or maybe later, or perhaps by the time they get home, the kids, they're alone, but not for as long a time, not for the entire day.
Sure, but I still don't get how you're saying that you presume this, you assume that. Again, I'm not trying to pick on you too much. I'm just trying to show you that when it comes to a point of your positions, at least on this instance, most of your positions are based on assumptions or presumptions, rather than when I said, well, who says this? Who actually wants this to happen?
If you want,
I'm not trying to say, you should have studies, but I'm just saying nobody seems to be saying what you're saying. Don't get me wrong. There are definitely going on the point of honesty very quickly. I am not going out of my way to say that there isn't anyone that doesn't do what you've just said. I'm not going out of my way to say, oh, well, nobody thinks that, nobody does that whatsoever. Of course there is, and of course there will be, and there always has been. My point is that that's not the majority, that's not the consensus. That doesn't seem to be the reason why people send their children to school.
I could be wrong, you're right, but I kind of have heard that my whole life, even when I was a kid. Like that was like half of the job of a teacher as a babysitter. Like the teachers would say that. So I'm kind of surprised that I'm hearing you be skeptical of that. I wasn't prepared for that. I mean, maybe that is different in where you're from, but that is kind of how it is here. Like it is.
Again, I don't want to go down the road of saying, well, okay, I understand exactly where you're coming from.
How you would. Yeah, that's. I'm just surprised that this is a contentious issue. But continue.
The reason why it's a contentious issue is because I've never seen teachers as a point of being babysitters. Even people that are coming from nursery, they're at the most informative years. They're normally trained to a very high standard, and they're normally looking after the children in more ways than what they're supposed to, admittedly. But they're there to actually give the foundations and the building blocks to make them have a good, successful schooling, and maybe even possibly a good, successful career, depending on what's been entrained into them, so to speak, with lack of a better word.
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose, again, the primary, I don't know, I'm not a teacher either, but I have heard this my whole life. So I've kind of just assumed it as common sense, but,
Cheers.
Yeah. So, fair enough. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Mr. Common Sense Guy. Yeah. So I'm not sure what to say, to be perfectly honest, because I'm kind of, I mean, I could look up some stuff, I suppose, but I mean, think about it logically. I mean, children need to learn. They need to do something during the day.
Sure.
And parents aren't home for most of the day. So it seems like a mutually beneficial situation to send them somewhere where they can, socialize, make friends.
I'm not denying it's not a symbiotic relationship. I'm just saying that your prescription of why the relationship is what it is doesn't seem to hold any truth. Because otherwise you could just get a tutor, for instance, to look after the child in your own house, especially for the rich.
People do that, but and a lot of the rich do that. They send them to private schools and things like that. I mean, another reason I suppose is socialization. But I mean here. So what exactly are we discussing? Are we discussing whether or not?
I have no idea.
It seems to have gone off track again. Okay, so.
If you want, we can move on from the schooling.
Originally, we were talking about vacations. And the reason that people like to go to vacations during the summer is because children are off during the summer. Now, an interesting point of fact is that that would potentially be a point against my point, because there's a whole 2 months where the kids are not in that sort of babysitting situation. However, that's often remedied with things like summer camp and stuff. But I mean, it's also a lot easier and cheaper to afford a babysitter for just 2 months rather than, year round.
Sure.
So I think that it still holds water at that point. But I mean, I could look something up and share my screen with you, but I feel like that might be not a good idea to do live right now. So
no, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what we can do instead then, because the whole point of the conversation was talking about the value of being able to go away on holiday and deciding when you can in a capitalist society, because that was the whole issue that we're going through, the reason why the necessity of capitalism actually is ingrained into society. Because in my opinion, using the holiday situation again very quickly, is because you get to choose on when, where, and how you get to go somewhere. It's not allocated to you. It's not, right, we've got 30 places here. Do you want to go here or not? Because I don't understand what your system would be for going away on holiday if you don't have a way of being able to barter or trade, because you're still going to have limited places.
I mean, true, but you're limited by sort of your desire. You could kind of go wherever you wanted to. I mean, sure, maybe what was the name of the place off of Madagascar again?
Maldives, in the middle of Madagascar and towards Sri Lanka, but yes.
Oh, okay.
I checked. I knew I was correct, but it was more South Asian Sea than that African Sea.
Okay, yeah. So it's sort of in that Gulf kind of. Well, not, it's bigger than a Gulf, but yeah. It does. Kayla mentioned in the comments that it seems that the vibe of American school is education, but another part is simply training for being in a job, which is another point as well. Sure. Which is why I feel like that under communism, it would be entirely different, because education would be free. So you could go to education. It would not be compulsory because, again, it's no longer a job training service so much as literally just a source of education for, of course, basic needs. You could learn skills there, but you would choose a lot more. It would be a lot more elective rather than, structured as it is now, which would allow one to go to the Maldives or to Disney World or whatever a lot more frequently. Sure. Because you could kind of just take time off anytime you wanted to, because you're going to school for yourself rather than for anyone else or for society. I mean, obviously, it helps society when people go to school, which is why we would encourage it and make it a lot easier to come and go as you please.
Sure.
And I find that that would allow that because the whole world wouldn't be, or at least society would not be as time segmented as it is now, where, like school for most of the year, then summer vacation and this and that. People would not associate certain times of year with vacation anymore. You would just go whenever you wanted to, like your desire is, because again, you want to own private property so that you can own a business, so that you personally can go on vacation whenever you want. But your workers who perhaps, or who are definitely not making as much money as you are because they're making money for you, they are obviously being paid fairly, I'm sure, but still, in order for you to make the most money, You do need some kind of structure, as Quinn has mentioned, but I believe that I think it should be up to society to decide when is the ideal time to stop having compulsory education. I think that perhaps it might be a good idea because, again, they need to be socialized.
When do you think that compulsive education should be stopped?
Probably around 10 to 12 years old. I'm probably younger than most people would say. I would go with because I really think that perhaps compulsory education should not. Let me finish. Let me say that compulsory education should not end, but a compulsory curriculum should end at that point. I think that once you're between 10 and 12, you should perhaps still go to school for a little while, but you should be able to choose entirely what you want. Like if you don't want to learn math anymore for a while, you can just stop learning math for a while and go somewhere else, or English, or something else.
Okay, I'm not going to be too forceful when I say this, but people need math, regardless of what.
I agree.
Which is fine, but people need math. People need English, especially if they're an English-speaking country or whatever native-speaking country that they have. They have to have their version of what we would classify as English lessons. They need that. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to function in society properly. They're not going to be able to work where they need to work. They're not going to be able to do these types of things. Because even if you're doing it where you decide to work, no, even now.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying now. But I don't think.
Yeah, but
unless
even in your example of if we were able to have this idea that you proposed, then even then, what if, say for instance, right, we've done what you said, between 10 and 12 you're able to do what you want to do. Does that mean
up until then?
Okay, up to 12. Let's say 12. Up to 12, then after 12, does that mean that you would say that they'll be able to work in the mines? I pick that specifically because that would be a job that would be able to go forward.
Okay, well, first of all, mining would probably be a lot more automated. I mean, sure, in the past, children did mining, but we have thankfully collectively decided that that is not a form of child acceptable labor. In fact, under 12 probably, in fact, 12 years old probably wouldn't do much of anything at all anyway. They might perhaps help around, but they probably wouldn't be up to any particular tasks. But they could be allowed to perhaps start an apprenticeship at such a young age. But I would first of all, I mean, a lot of people probably wouldn't drop math as much as we think now, because again, education would not be forced on these people. It would be voluntary. And I mean, it does go to show that a lot of people don't like school or whatever. A lot of kids, given the opportunity, would take time off. But I really feel like we don't value enough hold on, I need to close my window. We don't value boredom to the point that we actually should. That I think people, if kids were just 12 years old staying at home, I mean, sure, they could play video games all day, and that might be a problem. But in a society where education is just a part of life, that you can just go to school at any time, you don't need to pay for college, you just can pick up a class if you want, or just go to school and take some classes or something like that. I really feel like because again, education doesn't stop at 18. I mean, sure, we have secondary education, but there's a big divide between primary and secondary education in the world as it is today. So you sort of choose whether or not you want to go to school, again, if you can afford it. But since it would be free and encouraged, people would kind of just come and go as they please. I mean, you would potentially be educated instead of working. Like that would be your
the potential's there.
Yeah,
sure, the potential's there. But my point is, say that they don't want to go into education in your society that you've just painted, so to speak, to use the broad brush. Sorry,
no worries, that's fine.
It's a case of now that if you're 12 years old and you want to go into work, you're now, in your opinion, saying that they're allowed to go into work. Now, me personally, I don't really think that 12-year-olds should be in a working environment. I don't really think that they should need to be, The only environment I think they should do is enjoying their childhood, whatever that may be, whatever that may be. But in the society where you cut compulsory schools and education, the reason why we go to 16 is because there is so much to learn.
And I totally agree. So think of it like this. So imagine if at 12 you were given the option to take a gap year at 12 and you decided to, but a number of your peers didn't. And some of your peers did, but a number didn't. And then suddenly, you see them talking about things that you don't understand and you're starting to feel left behind. Would you not then feel compelled to rejoin them? You've had your childhood.
Does that happen in school already? Does that not happen in school already?
I don't think so, because again, like you said, it is compulsory until 16, and sort of the meme of student life is to hate on school. Whereas
just 1 second. Sorry. So you don't think that people that dislike science, for instance, wouldn't be able to talk with people that love science, for instance? Like if you're in year 10 and you've been studying science for quite a while and whatnot, or whatever the equivalent is, just before you leave high school. So if you're at that point and you study science, you know quite a bit, but you're not that interested in it. Are you telling me that you would be able to have the same level detailed conversation as somebody that doesn't care about science than somebody that would?
I mean, I don't understand the question. Probably not. But if you're
the reason
why
I do that is drawing the parallel. The reason why I do that is drawing the parallel of what you've just said about going away on holiday and learning something that somebody else doesn't know, because that happens all the time. People learn at different rates. People learn different things because they want to.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, yeah, somewhat. But I think that education is mostly, again, it's based on testing more than actually.
I agree with that.
Yeah. And I think that, so. And also, again, because it is compulsory for so long, I also could be wrong, too. I would be up to the democratic process. If people vote for school to stay longer, that's the way it is. I have no power. I mean, I would be outvoted, but if...
A quick point of contention, then.
I could potentially move to a different place that did it differently, but yeah.
Exactly. A quick point of contention very, very quickly, then. How do you reckon that society in themselves, regardless of where you are in the world, has decided upon the arbitrary number of whatever number that they put down for school? Do you not think it was decided democratically and via a government system?
I actually think it was more designed based on what they consider working age and the education you would need to work. So, and because that wouldn't be and maybe that's wrong, but I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure that's the main reason that we have compulsory education is for factory workers and stuff, which is why it's sort of lagged behind in recent years, in terms of preparing people for the world as it is now. And I feel like if we took the whole reason for education being to get a job, if we took that away and replaced it with education for education's sake, I think that it would be a lot different and a lot more multi-age groups too, because people would stop at 12 and perhaps play and have a childhood for a while. And then they would decide, okay, I'm kind of bored now. I don't have much to do. Maybe I should go back to school again because my parents are encouraging it. My friends are doing it. It seems like a good idea. And grades wouldn't be so much they wouldn't be grouped so tightly around an age. It would be just based on like you would based on what you want to do, A, and B, your sort of current understanding so far. Like you would take an entry test of how much you know already, and then or you could just say I don't know anything, and then you could just start over, and grades would be based on, again, education level rather than age. So you could potentially, it would be a lot more like college, but a lot sooner. And okay. I feel like because it's so fundamentally different than how we do education right now, it might be a little hard to understand. It might be a little complicated and difficult to imagine, but I really feel like it would fall into place.
No, I get it.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure you do. Yeah, I'm just saying in general. Mm-hmm.
I get it. The thing that I keep on coming back to is that you're saying that, for instance, if you're 12 years old, if you take a year out, then you should do an entry test. And the reason why you don't want the children to continue compulsory learning is because they're being tested. Now, well, no, again, I'm not trying to be a dick.
Yeah, go ahead. I don't take you as being a dick, and I appreciate that you say that you're not. So
yeah,
I hope
I'm
you're
not
being
trying.
honest in saying that. You're not like,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be a dick, but you're a fucking moron, or something like that.
No, definitely not. No, definitely not.
Even if you're thinking,
No, I don't. That's the thing with these types of conversations. I think
Mhm.
so many people come from so many different points of views, and a lot of people, when talking to you, would be like, "Well, you just want to change society because you hate society." I don't think that. I think you're trying to look for the best way forward and trying to work something out in your head where you think it's the best way forward. Me personally, I disagree, but that's society and democracy.
Precisely.
But the reason why I'd say I'm not trying to be a dick is because the reason why you said, right, we don't want to be testing these children all the way up past 12, but yet if they take a year out, we should do an entry test on them anyway, kind of seems, to coin a word that I think is underused, counterproductive.
Yeah, no, I see what, or perhaps possibly even contradictory. I see what you're saying. I'm glad you've asked that. Are you finished? Was that your main
Yes,
point?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I see what you're saying. So, I think that grading shouldn't be based on testing. I think, but I don't see a problem with an entry level sort of how much do you know kind of a test, and as far as going back into school, I don't see like if you wanted to learn a language, like I mean Duolingo is an example. If you pick up a
Sure.
new language, it'll say, are you new to this language, or do you know how much, like, or have you had some experience with this language? And that would sort of be the test. If you say I have no experience with it, you would just go into the entry level thing. But otherwise they would say, okay, ask a few random questions of varying levels of understanding and see kind of where you're at. I don't, and then it wouldn't be graded, it would just be decided.
No, I get it. But now, before I say this, I want to put a caveat in. I don't actually necessarily agree with the testing culture that comes from schools anymore at all. But to put that to aside for one instance, what do you think that the grading system is designed to be doing? Because from my understanding, it's literally what you've just described, to be able to give you an idea of what your education level is, what your understanding level is, and be able to transfer that into a quick, easy understanding for people that are working, or for people that are grading, or for people that are assessing you. That, okay, this is quickly what we think that you know and what level that you're at. Here's where you should go. Here's what you should do.
Well, here's what I've sort of gathered is the testing, the standard, especially standardized testing, is more so for sort of funding. Actually, it's to see if the school is producing enough A's that it's using its public funding. Again, private schools are probably different, but public schools I know do this.
No, they're exactly the same. No, the public schools and private schools are exactly the same. They're funded exactly the same by performance levels.
Okay, but they're also, I mean, but private schools are also paid for to attend as well. So I think that there is some level.
Yeah, but they're paid.
Which is generally why they are better.
Yeah, but they're paid. No, the reason why they're better is because the schools are generally considered better. Is because the people pay for top class teachers because they know what they're getting. Where in public schools they have to draw from a pool that's closest towards them. Now, I don't necessarily agree or disagree with what section is there. But the reason why private schools generally do better is because they are paid for via how good the schools produce and give your education standards. So what they are saying is that if you get good A's, then you're probably worth 20, 30K a year. But if the public school gets C's, then it's probably only worth 10 or 12. Arbitrary numbers, but you know what I mean.
Which seems kind of baffling to me, in that if it's doing well, I understand rewarding it, but if it's doing bad, clearly the resources are not good enough and it needs better resources. So it seems like the funding should be going to places that are doing not well, not in the sense that they should be going into the pockets of the directors and the teachers, into their paychecks, but the resources should be, their funding should be expanded.
In a private school, that's what happens.
Yes, but I'm talking about
it's the public school. Yeah, but I was specifically talking about private schools. And that's the reason why they generally perform better or outperform.
Exactly, and that's why I find it baffling that performance decides funding in terms of public schools, and obviously it's for private schools too. But they also
technically it doesn't
money anyway.
Technically it doesn't. Technically it's both, but it's more to do with the income tax or the household taxes that are in its area. So if you don't have very high taxes in its area, then the school generally has really low funding. So it doesn't matter if the school's going to be really good and get a high federal for the US funding, but the local funding is going to be so subpar that there's not much that it can do.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know. I feel like that's a problem and that should be addressed, which is why I feel like it would be addressed in a more leftist system, because it would be more, egalitarian and more focused on. Well, because education would be actually while it isn't compulsory, it would be very highly valued, because education produces good, smart citizens, and good, smart people produce good, smart things for the world. So education would be very highly valued and promoted, but it would not be compulsory, because, again, people who are forced into education don't do as well as people who choose to be there, which is, I guess, sort of another. I don't know if that applies to private schools, because, again, you choose to go there, but your parents kind of choose to put you in there. So maybe I won't bring that up. But again, people who do, I mean, that's what's great about college, is if you can afford it, why, you go into what you want to go into. Obviously, a lot of times what you want is based on what your paycheck will be, but not always. In fact, that's why we have liberal arts and things like that. People go into education for the sake of education. And I feel like that needs to be a lot more the standard. And that's why I promote it that way. Because then, again, people would be, say you're bad at math for whatever reason, or English or whatever, you can still do that. And math applies to a lot of things, especially STEM things. But STEM would not be the number one thing like it is now. Arts would be just as valued as STEM and things like that. And math actually does apply very intimately with art. But people would learn art math a lot better if they're not so good at numbers math. They would understand ratios and things like that a lot more intuitively than perhaps numbers on paper. And again, that's just an example. So people would they would learn what they need and what they want to learn in order to contribute to society, and artistic contributions would be valued the same as scientific contributions.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. So that's sort of where I'm coming from.
Sure, but that didn't address what I was trying to get across to you, which was, if you have an area that doesn't have a particularly great area, for instance, urban decay, so to speak, you don't have many people around, it's not drawing in a good number of teachers and things like that. It doesn't matter what type of system that you have at that point, whether it's funded or non-funded, or whether it's done by volunteers or not. If the area in itself isn't changed, then it doesn't matter.
Okay, you're absolutely right. So a lot of those places would be boosted with, it wouldn't be money so much, but it would be industry and public works like parks and better living conditions and things like that. Those things would be very high on the list of things to do to improve those areas, and there are studies to show
about crime.
Well, okay, so crime, I'm pretty sure, from my understanding, crime is a mental health and poverty issue. So if poverty is eliminated, first and foremost, that's a lot of it. The rest goes entirely.
Explain white collar crime then, if it's to do with poverty.
That's mental health issue, because greed.
No, it's not. Most people that are in white collar issues are not have any problems with mental health whatsoever.
Most people in white collar situations are psychopaths. They are like.
Is that opinion or fact?
That's a fact. A lot of people who are CEOs and things like that who commit those kinds of crimes tend to be psychopathic. Now, not all of them, but a lot of them, I believe that the desire to exploit and also, again, it's also the system too. I mean, the system benefits people who have a lot of money. So swindling a lot of people through Enron or whatever, or through.
Sure, that's not where I was going with it. So it's fine. You don't need to go down that road. But what I was trying to say was that if you limit things down to poverty and mental health issues, then you still have other, let's say, needs or wants that are not perpetrated because of poverty or mental issues. You can't claim that everybody. Well, for instance, somebody that is a white-collar person that decides that they're going to rape somebody isn't doing it because they're poverty-stricken, and 9 times out of 10 isn't doing it because they want to have any mental issues or have mental issues. It's
Are you
normally to do
sure
with
that
issues
the
of power.
desire to take advantage of somebody like that is not indicative of some perhaps mental issues of some kind? Not perhaps not in a full-blown disorder,
Sure,
but
but if you do it as one aspect, then you have to include the other aspect. That now means that anybody that's not mentally challenged or mental issues that is now poor, you're now saying is doing it just because they're poor. So be careful in what way that double-edged sword goes.
I don't see how. I mean, poverty begets mental health issues. I mean, the
No, it
stress of
doesn't.
poverty. Yes, it does. If you're poor and you can't receive mental help, you're also stressed about your bills and where you're going to get, where your food's coming from, whether or not you're going to stay in your house all the time. All that stress
Have you done any
creates.
study with mental health?
I mean, I've experienced mental health issues myself, but I've also done some research. I mean, do you have counter examples?
For instance, I used to do a lot of counseling. I studied to be a
Oh,
counselor.
cool.
And most of the things that we have with people that have mental health issues or mental health conditions normally stem from traumatic experiences that have happened in the past.
May I ask a
Or
question? I'm sorry to
yeah,
interrupt. Would you consider a stretch of poverty to not, would that not be considered traumatic?
no. Otherwise, every single homeless person that was ever homeless would have mental health problems, and they don't. There is
Almost
a high
most of them
portion,
do. Yeah.
yeah, but there's a high portion of it because they had mental health issues before they were homeless.
Is trauma not just an intense, incredible amount of stress, whether it become from a physical thing or from a mental thing? I mean, being abused both
Oh,
physically
sure,
and mentally could cause
sure,
stress, and
yeah,
that
yeah,
causes trauma. I think that
sure.
poverty causes trauma in the same way that living in active addiction might cause trauma. It's not the first thing that comes to mind when you think of trauma, but it is a real thing.
I'm not saying it's not a real thing by any stretch of the imagination.
Mhm.
My point is on this issue is that if you classify everything under a singular umbrella, as in it being a case of uh, mental health or poverty is the only cause of criminality, is just woefully inept. It doesn't cover
Mm.
hardly anything of it whatsoever. They are portions, and you could
I
argue
think
that
you'd be
they are high
surprised.
portions. I trust me, I have done my research in it as well, my friend.
Mhm.
I'm not just coming from a
Okay.
point of opinion.
Where do you think crime comes from?
I think crime comes from a point of need and greed, as well as it becoming from, as what you said, poverty, which
Okay.
obviously comes from need as well. I'm not
Here,
saying that
okay.
poverty doesn't produce criminals.
I think we agree much more than you might think. I think greed is a mental health problem. Now, I don't think that perhaps it is a disorder in the sense that maybe we might consider schizophrenia a disorder, but I think that the desire to accumulate wealth far beyond what you need at other people's expenses is indicative of internal mental processes that show perhaps antisocial behavior, and may be considered to be a sort of mental health problem that perhaps one might want to deal with. Why is it that you feel the need to constantly keep accumulating things at other people's expense? Why does having so much more than you need specifically at other people's expense make you feel good? Why do you
Is it
need?
specifically at other people's expense? Say, for instance, I don't know, you want to keep on buying stuff off me, and I
Mhm,
keep on selling you the stuff.
mhm.
Is that me taking the need off of you, or you with the need off of me?
Well, I mean, it could be both, honestly. It could be, why do I feel the need to keep accumulating and becoming a hoarder? And why do you feel the need that, why are you okay with potentially allowing me to ruin my life? I mean, you could be like, I'm not doing it. I'm just allowing you to do it. I'm enabling you, but I'm not
What, by
actively
collecting stuff that you
encouraging.
want?
I mean, well, we have to be more specific with the example, because what about drug dealers? I mean,
I gathered that that's where you were
yeah.
going, but I wasn't going with that. I was talking about shop owners. But you can go down drugs if you
I
want.
was, but that's why I use the term of hoarding. I mean, if somebody keeps, I mean, if you're a shop owner who has a goddamn, I don't know, an antique shop, and this person comes in and is like addicted to antiques, then like, I mean, I mean, drugs and alcohol are a better example for that case. But I mean, think of it like, I mean, I would need a more specific example. I mean, if you like a shop
But
owner, right?
if your example is universal, then it wouldn't matter what example I would use; it'd be universal.
Well, it would be universal, but it would be more, there would be different details. So let's think, I mean, again, greed only comes from capitalism. I don't think that greed would develop in the same way. It might still develop in other ways, but in under things like communism, because again, accumulation of wealth is the goal of capitalism. So
when you see animals that hoard different things, is that from the capitalist animals? I'm being playful on purpose. Is that from the capitalist animals?
What animals are you referring to?
Say, for instance, squirrels or most hoarders for winter.
Okay.
Say, for instance, bears that will fight over salmon so that they can build themselves back up again. Literally will fight and kill each other for it. Is that to do with capitalism, or is that to do with their nature?
I mean, it seems more like a survival thing. I don't see how I don't see how that could be considered greed. Because, I mean, are they...
You're literally fighting somebody else for what they have or what they've already caught. What's more greed than that?
Greed would be like I have enough, but I never have enough. No matter how, the greed would be if the squirrel has enough nuts for winter and then they're invading other squirrels' things for more nuts.
They do that.
Okay.
They literally do that. Yeah. Say, for instance, going back to the bear territories thing, you literally have bears that have had twice the amount of weight that they would have done after they've gone out of being hibernation, still fighting over bears that have only literally just come out of hibernation to stop them from eating so they can eat more, even though they're already double their weight, which is where they're supposed to be.
I would have to look into that more. I think that is, I think it's still different though, because again, they're accumulating food and not just wealth. And it's
why is it different? Because wealth will beget food.
Wealth does beget food, but it also begets other things like, you know,
sure.
a bigger house and such. But this is a very good question. I'm not trying to dodge. I'm actually very interested. I'm glad that you brought this up because this is very interesting to think about. But I still, because it's like animals don't communicate and think of others in the same way that humans do. They don't necessarily, and maybe I'm wrong, but
no. They base everything on their actual instincts and survival instincts, as you quite rightly stated beforehand. The reason why I brought the animals up as an example is because it's intrinsically in our nature. Because we have to hoard, because we were hunters and gatherers.
This is actually great. I'm actually glad that. Okay, so would you consider stress to an overactive stress, like a being stressed in social situations, to be a disorder? If somebody can't,
it would come under. It mostly comes under either an antisocial spectrum or an autistic spectrum, depending on what level that you're talking about.
That stress in minuscule amounts is useful. That's how we create fight or flight. That's how we survived. An overactive production of cortisol, the stress hormone, is a disorder. So if the animal is overactive in their need to accumulate, I feel like that could be considered a problem with their brain and their neurotransmitter production, a potentially a disorder, an overactive sense of needing to accumulate more. So greed, essentially. And that's how I consider it to be somewhat of a mental health issue. It's an overactive experience of the really, the genuinely valuable need to survive.
Sure. The only thing that I would add to that is, how do you prove that it's an overreaction? How do you prove that, in your opinion, that what the animals are doing, for instance, as we're animals, is not a mental health condition or affliction, and how people that are wealthy are still having this affliction, apart from opinion?
When it becomes an addiction, when there's no end, when they don't really have a goal, when the goal is just more, when there is no, when there's no point at, I mean, obviously humanity should continue to keep striving, but when it becomes all that they think about, and they'll do things underhanded and such to, again, not just underhanded tactics incentivized by capitalism, but just, when it becomes their main focus and it is becoming a detriment to other parts of their lives or a detriment to other people as well. Now, I am not a psychologist, so perhaps talking to a psychologist, perhaps I should talk to a psychologist to perhaps better get a definition, but loosely that would be my understanding that when it becomes problematic in their lives or others.
Sure. I mean,
I
I can almost categorically tell you that you're wrong in your classification. But
okay.
even if your classification was correct,
Mm-hmm.
where is your boundary line to be able to prove this? Because you can have animals in the animal kingdom do exactly what you've just described of people doing. Because we can see this in monkey troops, for instance, where they hoard everything away from other troops.
Mm-hmm. Well, what is your categorical definition of disorder?
Disorder would be something that would be, in my opinion, abnormal to what we would say as normal operation. So, for instance, you could classify autism as a disorder, as we do, because it's not something that we would classify as a normality. Now, that doesn't mean it's wrong to have it, and it doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means it's not what we classify normal function.
I'm trying to answer your question. I do appreciate that you've asked this. I don't. It seems like because you're using the example of animals' greed in nature as a sort of justification for it to not be a disorder. Is that correct? No? Okay.
No. My point of using the animal as a example is to point out that the greed doesn't stem from the point of capitalism. It stems from the point of
no.
instinct.
I never said that. Yeah, no. I apologize if I implied that. What I meant was greed. Capitalism incentivizes greed. Greed itself, I consider to be a disorder that could come naturally of anybody, and capitalism is not necessary in order for it to manifest. Okay. But I believe that capitalism incentivizes greedy behavior and greedy mindset because the whole goal is to accumulate wealth.
Well, the whole goal is the same as any other system, is to make sure that you can live. It's not the whole goal of capitalism. The whole thing in capitalism is the same thing as it is for any system, is to make sure that you have enough to live off of and make sure that you're able to, eat, drink, be merry.
But the goal, but doing that by accumulating as much wealth as possible and property.
Yeah, to make sure that you've got enough to be able to do what you want when you want to.
Yes.
Same as if you were hoarding food.
There's no reason to stop there, though.
Hang on. Just as if it's a case of when you are hoarding food for the winter, you don't stop because you've got enough. You keep on going to make sure that you've got enough throughout the whole of winter. Going back to antiquity.
Okay. But we now in society, we can make sure I think we can achieve post scarcity rather easily right now. I think that scarcity is no longer an issue and it is being perpetuated by capitalism. Now that's a discussion we can continue. Perhaps we can go into that, but right now that's sort of not quite what we're discussing.
Sure.
It sounds like you might disagree, which is good.
I do, but as you said, carry on.
Yeah. I think that I think that it's just. I think that we can move beyond the state of nature, sort of, every person for themselves kind of a thing. And of course, that's how we developed. We developed through communities, and it just seems like wanting so much for yourself at the expense of other people just sounds like a something you should see a psychologist about. It just sounds like something that perhaps they could help you with.
Sure. I just wanted to point out words that you just used. Sounds like.
Yeah, I'm not a psychologist, so I don't know.
No. The reason why I pointed that out is it's an opinion. Now, you have every single right in the world to classify that as your opinion, and I agree with you. I do think that it's very selfish for people to be able to hoard as much wealth as people do. But the thing is, with personal property, let's even go to personal property. If you more than one toothbrush, are you allowed more than one toothbrush? Or do you have to wait until you're given one? With capitalism, you can go out and buy as many as you want, as long as you have the means to do that. Yeah, as long as you have the means to do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah. Well, a toothbrush... It would be, I mean, yeah, you could have more than one toothbrush if you wanted to. I mean, sure, some people don't need as many toothbrushes as other people. Some people have, I mean, again, they might even have a sort of a compulsive OCD where they need to have a new toothbrush every time. I'm sure that exists now.
It does. Yes, yeah. It very much does. Yes.
So, and I would view that perhaps they might benefit as well from a visit to a psychiatrist or a therapist.
Yes, but that's because they have OCD, not because that they want to have a selection of toothbrushes. But yes, like a woman that wants a selection of shoes.
I think that like how, I mean, and I'm not comparing you to these people, but in the
Please
past,
do.
okay, I am not, but in the past, we have viewed we didn't know about certain disorders like depression and schizophrenia and things like that, and we just did not know that they existed, and we just be like, oh, come on, just cheer up, we didn't realize that it was a thing. I personally, in my opinion, view greed and things like that in a similar way, that we just, because our economic system incentivizes it, we haven't really looked too deep into it. And so I think that if we were to look more into it and perhaps make a more, less accumulation focused economic system that is more focused on standard of living for all rather than accumulating for your own personal gain, I think that we would find there would be a lot to be discovered there. Now, again, that's my opinion. I will totally agree, and I could be wrong.
Sure. But, I mean, the only thing that I would quickly add to that before moving forward is that you're entitled to your opinion, and I think that towards the end of it, I kind of agree with certain aspects that you said. But if you're going to go to the point of, well, this is what I believe, you need to explain and expand why you believe it is what you say it is. Because just saying, well, I think it's greed is because they just hoard everything, doesn't make it a disorder. You need to now prove why it's a disorder. Well, because at least in the formation of this argument.
And you're absolutely right. I agree. And I believe it is a disorder because it can negatively impact their life, and it can negatively impact the lives of others unnecessarily. And I think that they could.
But anything could.
That's true, which is why disorders are natural processes that are going too much.
Sure, but it means it's an abnormality. It normally means it's an abnormality or something that operates outside of normal. Now, if you have people in every single continent and a selection of people in every single continent that reach different levels of income wealth, then that doesn't prove that it's an abnormality, because it means it's capable and copable in each and every society.
I think achieving wealth does not necessarily mean that you are greedy either. I think that capitalism incentivizes greedy behavior because those people accumulate wealth at a sort of as their primary directive. But I don't think that it is required in order to become wealthy to be greedy. I mean, look at the Flappy Bird guy from a couple of years ago when he just developed a game and it just blew up for no reason and for just randomly, and then he became rich and he didn't even like it necessarily because it gave him too much attention and it happened too fast. So it isn't required, but it is certainly helpful if you're trying, if the goal is to accumulate wealth and property, to be greedy. And I think that having a system that incentivizes greed and plays on people's sort of bad tendencies in other directions as well, potentially, we should move past that.
Sure. I mean, I can draw on to any point. If you're going to concede to me that humanity in itself has a condition in which greed is a part of a mental condition or a mental disorder, so to speak, then it doesn't matter what system of any form of governance or economic system you put in front of me, you will find people that are going to abuse that system some way or shape or form, which means that's not the system's fault, then that's the people operating within its system.
Yeah, and which is why mental health care should be a very important and fundamental part of any system, because people should be learning to deal with these things. First of all, it should be known and acceptable, and there's nothing wrong with having a selfish disorder. I mean, typically that might happen because you were perhaps, now this is not everybody, but you can either get it from having too much as a child or from having too little. You could develop it because you have this sort of traumatic memory of not having enough to eat, and so you constantly have to do that. Now, I'm not, again, it could
no. The reason why I oohed, the reason why I oohed wasn't because of that. It's because it kind of negates the argument that you're making against capitalism at that point. If you're saying that it doesn't matter if you have a lot or if you have a little, then you're saying intrinsically that it comes down to human nature. Then even with a system that incentivizes you to grab more and stay where you are, or a system that would, in essence, in utopian theory, give you everything that you need, they would still want more because it's human nature.
Yeah. Now, and I actually disagree with what you just said, because so can depression, so can schizophrenia, so can social anxiety. All those things, it doesn't matter. I mean, it develops across all continents, across all things. Now,
Of
these
course.
things, yeah, but it seems that these sort of mental health issues develop more under capitalism, especially nowadays, because of just the way it is. Now, that may or not be, may
I
or not be true.
disagree. I
You
disagree
disagree,
with
that's
that.
fine.
The
But there
reason
are
why, but the
studies.
reason why I disagree is because mental health is now becoming to the forefront of almost every other society, and that
Mhm,
doesn't matter if it's to do with capitalism or if it's to do with a good form of government or whatever. The
mhm,
fact is that because society as a norm is now pushing forward with mental health, more
mhm,
and more people are being diagnosed with it. It's like
mhm,
if you are testing a thousand for a
mhm,
specific disease, for instance, and
mhm,
then you go up to 100,000 for testing, you're going to expect your testing results to at least go up by 50%, maybe
mhm,
even 100%. It's always going to get more the more that you test for it. And
mhm.
this goes for the same thing. So I
Yeah,
don't believe that what you just said is correct. I think it's just being
let
put forward more as a forefront. So I
let
don't
me
think
use a
capitalism
different
produces more
example.
mental health.
Let me use a different example of a different non-standard sort of view of mental health disorder, and which is addiction, and another one incentivized by capitalism. So let's imagine that you are working that could be incentivized by capitalism, but isn't necessarily, maybe, let's say, um,
Hmm.
which is perhaps somebody who is addicted to meth, because they
Sure.
work in a factory and they work long hours, and when they do meth, they are up, they do better, they do a lot of things. So perhaps they were already prone to addiction tendencies because of their mental body, or they found it through capitalism because they found that it was mutually beneficial. I believe greed is the same way. You could be born with whatever develops greed, or you could develop it because of the system that we are in, because of the need. Yeah, because of accumulating wealth being the
Okay,
goal.
so do you believe that people that are alcoholics or drug addicts, do you believe that they become addicted, or do you think that they already have an addictive personality or have a form of a disposition to be addicted already?
I believe both. I think that there are people with addictive personalities. I actually have experience with addiction myself. I was an opioid addict, and I still am technically, but I'm clean. Been clean for months now, and I have no problem drinking and putting it down. I could do cocaine and put it down. I could do any other substance. Heroin just got me for whatever reason, which is why I think that I don't have an addictive personality. I can put anything down, but for some reason that one just got me. So I think that addiction can develop as per an addictive personality, or per circumstances of somebody's life that leads them to a substance that just binds with their which just gives them a feeling that they could not get otherwise, and it becomes out of control for them.
Sure. I mean, I've never gone to the extent of what you just said, but I used to smoke a lot of cigarettes, so nicotine, and I have my own opioids as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in fact, I have actually morphine sulfate,
Mm,
and I
nice.
generally go.
Glad you're all really far away. Yeah.
To be fair, it does nothing because I'm in pain so much. It does nothing to me.
I'm sorry that
But
I'm glad that it
no,
helps.
it's fine. It doesn't. That's not the point.
Yeah, I know, right?
But
Anyway,
hang on, just 1 second.
take your time. Hmm. Hello to whoever is behind you. Somebody has entered his room. A family member, a roommate, I'm not sure. So he's taking a second. All right.
I've just got some food.
Excellent.
But yes, going back to the point, you would expect me to probably be more addicted to the morphine sulfate, but in actual fact, I was, because I no longer smoke. I haven't smoked for 7 years, but I was more addicted to the nicotine than I was ever going to be, or as I have been to the morphine sulfate,
Mm,
simply because I wanted the nicotine more. I allowed myself to have the nicotine. I
mm,
purposely don't have as much as I should do with morphine because I know I can be addicted to it. And I think that with humanity in itself, you have a essence of willpower or self-determination of deciding whether or not you're going to not necessarily allow yourself to be addicted, but you can stop if you want to. It's a case of, do you want to?
Well, the problem with addiction is a lot of people want to, but they can't. They want to so badly, but they just can't. They will do anything. And in fact, that's what they need to do. They need to be willing to give up anything and oftentimes join groups and have help from the community. So I think that I see that an addiction is something that could develop naturally or based on your circumstances and could possibly be incentivized or pushed through the society that we live in. And I think capitalism can do that with both addiction and greed. I think greed is a similar thing where some people are prone to it, some people could be pushed into it, and some people are just, for whatever reason, seem to be immune to it. But it doesn't change the fact that I think more people would be greedy in the same way that more people would develop addictions under capitalism based on the circumstances that it creates. Whereas
I would ask you why.
Because capitalism is the private ownership of property, and which can be used for accumulating wealth. Success in capitalism is determined by one's bank account. If you have enough money, usually success, because of our huge economic disparity, is mostly just enough to survive and be happy, whatever happy is. But from an economic sense, success is making as much money as physically possible. But again, not everyone agrees with that. But that is the framework that we live within. And
no, that's not the framework. No. I'm sorry. I agree with everything that you said up to exactly that point. That's not the framework. Because if the framework was to incentivize people to make as much money as you possibly can, then everybody would want that, or at least the majority of people would want that. And in fact, as you quite rightly said, most people are happy to live within their means. So that wouldn't be the framework.
A lot of people are happy to, but I don't. I disagree. I think a lot of people dream for wealth simply because it is the goal. Because it is possible, even if it's unlikely. It's certainly possible for anybody to become it, but not everybody to become wealthy. Let me throw in a different aspect then. Let's take wealth and systems out of it, for instance. Why do you think people that are sports stars or songwriters or singers, besides the wealth, are so followed by people? I think celebrity culture is very profitable, and actually, obviously,
again, take the economics out. Okay.
But you're asking why it is so popular. What if it? But my answer includes economics. But
it includes, but it doesn't mean that it's so. Anyway, carry on.
Okay. Yeah. No. Okay. I will take that. So, well, first, I do want to say that celebrity culture is profitable because people will buy products with their name on it. If a what's the word? Parasocial streamer or something like that has merchandise and stuff like that. It makes a lot of money for YouTube and Twitch, and it also makes money for them and whoever, if they have a manager or anything like that.
Sure.
Now, moving that aside, it also, because we glamorize, oftentimes those celebrities, musicians and things are wealthy and successful and have access to, tend to be women and men and just everybody, they are adored by other people. So we adore them. It's also just because they have something that we don't, which is, I guess,
where I'm going.
Yeah. Which is sort of, but I think that could be remedied again with, the removal of capitalist private property, because again, you would follow the person because you like their personality, not just because they're promoted or anything like that. I could say more, but it sounds like you want to say something.
Yeah. The reason why I said take economics out of it was because that, yes, people that are famous get a lot of money for what they do. But the reason why they get a lot of money isn't just because of their promotion. It's because people follow them, because people like them, because people have a intrinsic following of them because they like something about them. And it has nothing necessarily to do with what money they've got, what car they've got, what they can do. It all comes from, can he kick a ball into the back of the net? Can he catch a football? Can she or he sing? These are more important than what the monetary wealth is in
Celebrity culture.
Celebrities culture, yes.
Mhm.
Thank you. So my point to you is that even if you were to take out the economics of that, people are still going to want that because they want to idolize people. And that has nothing to do with the idea of capitalism. That comes to the point of humanity picking somebody to put them onto a pedestal to idolize them. And that has nothing to do with capitalism whatsoever. That's just intrinsically human nature.
I think that capitalism, though, like with greed and addiction, it sort of preys on our sort of innate need to look up to people and exploit, making it worse because it makes money. Because again, the idea that they are so, I don't know, fabulous. I mean, thankfully, celebrity culture has kind of gone down with the democratization of the ability to become a celebrity. With things.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think it's now gone down? Because nothing's really changed apart from more people realizing that these celebrities aren't happy. They're still just as rich. They're still just as followed, and they're still just as talented in some instances, or still followed for what they were at the beginning. So if they've gone down in popularity and things like that, do you reckon it could be because people see that if you have all of this stuff or do these things, that you can be happy? So it's not the monetary gain, it's the idea of being happy. The same as people wanted to be in religion because they thought they were going to be happy.
I actually think that may have been an aspect of it, but I think the main reason is the democratization of becoming a celebrity. The fact that that literally anybody could. In the past, there were gates that you had to pass, and you had to get on the gatekeeper's side to let you in. You had to get on the radio. You had to get on TV. You had to get on the sports team. You had to be picked.
You still do.
Not necessarily. I mean, YouTube could, or Twitter, or whatever, or Instagram.
Yeah, that's a different platform, but you still have to take off from that platform. But there's still a platform. What you're describing are platforms, not hurdles or gates.
Well, in the past, they were gates. Now they are more hurdles or more just bumps that you need to overcome. And I think that, I mean, obviously you have to do something because no one's just going to like you because, although that's not true, because I mean, in your country, you have celebrities that are born into royalty. So technically they are just born, and that's all that matters.
No, there's a reason why people dislike Harry at the moment. And that's not just because that he married, I can't remember her name.
Thank God.
That's how, that's how important. But it's not because that he married her. It's simply because he left his post, he's left his station. He doesn't seem to have any respect for his family, so on and so forth. People will, yes, idolize people like they did back in royalty days and so on and so forth. But as you quite rightly said, that comes to a hurdle, that comes to a gate. But we don't have those, and we haven't had those for such a long time. Now, I could say to you that,
long, to be honest, it really hasn't been that long.
I would say since the 80s. No, I would say since the 80s, because the pirate radios, all you need to do is get your song and listen to one person on the radio and it can transfer.
Put forth the money to get the equipment to get your stuff up there. I feel like it was, I mean, certainly nowadays it is almost zero. But
did you know where Ed Sheeran got his break from?
Who?
Ed Sheeran, you know, the ginger guy from the UK.
I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible. It's always been possible for outsiders to
get
in.
So you know then. Okay, never mind.
Yeah. Okay.
So did you want to say to the people how he got into it when he was just busking on the street and he got caught by somebody who's busking on the street and they put him in a record?
Fox or whatever, right? Picked him up or something?
Something similar to that, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like there's more to the story. Perhaps I don't know. Would you like to say it?
No, that's literally it. He was busking on Camden streets in London, and he was picked up by I can't remember if it was Jamie Foxx. I think it was somebody else, but he was busking with a couple of people, and he got put into a song. Other people around him in his genre heard him and kept on going around on different people for a very, very long time. He was couch surfing. He didn't even have a home for a long time.
Yeah, it's quite a story of him. I'm very impressed. It's always been possible for. Well, not always, maybe, but it's not.
Well, you literally had slaves. You literally had slaves that were game infamy for being gladiators, and in actual facts of just working if they were good at their jobs.
I think that, I mean, if we're going to go into the psychology of admiration, I think that may just come from the fact that we learn from our parents, and we have role models and stuff when we're young, and it's just part of human society that we learn from one another. And so watching somebody and admiring them and wanting to be like them is just human nature. But it can certainly go out of whack when you become a stalker or something like that, or you become like creepy, or
oh yeah, definitely,
all of your energy into admiring this person, which is certainly happening now, especially because in addition to it being democratized so that just about anybody can become.
What do you mean by democratized?
Democratization means giving it the power to the people, allowing
it was always mostly to the people, because even if you were, say for instance, let me say, if you were to actually, and if you were good, then it wouldn't matter. If you were bad, it doesn't matter how much money the person who wants to back you puts you into. Say for instance, let's take the Monkees from the 70s or 80s. They were really good at singing, but they couldn't do any of the music. Because people found out that they couldn't do the music, they were almost dropped overnight by the people. And the company themselves kept on putting money into it to try and get them back to the famous as they were. And they just couldn't shake that duck because people just didn't like them. They felt that they were misinterpreted. They felt that they were hoodwinked.
Misled, yeah. I think that has more to do with the fact that they were misled rather than just something intrinsic to admiration and celebrity culture. I think when people feel like they've been misled and lied to, they don't like that. But I don't see how that changes anything.
Well, the reason why I use it as an example is because people have always decided who's going to be sorry, I was thinking of an example after I state this. That's the reason why I say killed. People have always come to the point of even being more powerful than some Roman emperors, where Roman emperors would have to go to the crowd, die or live, and the crowd would decide over the emperor who would live and who would die. Now, that's always been in our system for celebrity, always been in our system. The people have always decided it.
Yeah. Okay. So when I say democratization, I don't mean.
That's why I asked you what you meant.
Yeah. No, that's a good question. Okay, I see what you're saying. Now, when I say democratization, it means. Let me look up the actual definition of democratization, because it means giving the power to the people, but not the power to decide who becomes a celebrity, but the power to become a celebrity is sort of what I'm implying. But
if the people don't follow them, then how could they ever become a celebrity? Because it doesn't matter if the company or whatever puts them forward as it. If the people don't want to follow them, they just won't.
Let's see. It says the act of rendering or the process of becoming democratic as the democratization of European institutions. Also, it means when the way I'm using it is that the democratization not of worshiping celebrities, but the democratization of putting yourself online, the ability to just have a laptop with a webcam built into it and a microphone and some headphones, you can become a celebrity. Whereas in the past, you needed to impress somebody often. I mean, maybe.
Can I make a quick point to that?
But basically, yeah, it's not 100%. There's always that 1% tiny 0.01%.
That's not where I was going. That's not where I was going. My point is that what you're saying is that if you were to do it by yourself, as in YouTube, you have to have the power of being able to have everybody like you, or a portion of people like you, where all you had to do at one point was get one person to like you. And then you were going to be a star. That's in essence what you're conveying to me in my mind.
Okay, yeah, and that's kind of what I'm saying, but not entirely. The rest of the statement would be that we have a lot more options in terms of where we find our entertainment now as well. We have a lot more options for celebrities. You could just go on Twitch or YouTube and find somebody with nobody watching them and decide to watch them or something like that. Whereas in the past, you only had the TV or the radio or even the Coliseum. And so the people in the stands, they weren't gladiators. They didn't even have the option of becoming gladiators because gladiators were often slaves and owned by somebody else or whatever.
99% of them were slaves. That's why I used them before.
Yeah, exactly. So the ability, like like you could only worship the people in front of you. You could only if you had the ability to do so. So now there is a lot more options of people to look at and consume. This is a very sort of nuanced and difficult to describe concept, and I'm glad that you brought it up. And I just hope that we are being clear in what we're saying.
Yeah, sure. I mean, me personally, I think that we're talking about the expansion of platforms.
Yeah.
And the way of people being able to become more celebrity is probably more accessible and more easier. But I don't think that it was ever as gated as you're prescribing it to be. I think it was more of a case of you had to do more work. But yeah, it still wasn't anybody off of the street, if you have the right sound that they were looking for, was able to go where they needed to do, or if it organically picked up because of them busking, for instance, or doing live gigs, because a lot of people were picked up via live gigs back in the day.
Yeah, but there's also a lot of examples of, and unfortunately we don't really have any examples because the very nature of them being an example means that we don't know about them, which is the people that have the talent but just for some reason never got noticed or picked up. Like, I'm sure.
I mean, that happens today though.
Yeah, but I mean, I feel like it happens way less, and even if they do, they still get some following because again, they can put their stuff on YouTube and stuff, and perhaps they just don't know how to, get a title that grabs people's attention or something like that. But I feel like it would be almost, and I feel like it's going in a direction where it's becoming, the 15 minutes of fame thing is sort of an inevitability that everybody will eventually have a sort of YouTube channel or some sort of platform that they can express themselves on, that at least somebody will see it eventually. And sure. And in the past that just wasn't the case. And I think that the problem is that you need, in order to do this, you still need to make money off of it, which thankfully, again, with things like Patreon and, PayPal and things like that, it becomes ever easier, but it's, and merchandise and stuff like that. But it's still, I think, an inhibitive step, and something that gets in the way of things is the need to sort of justify your existence through buying, through money. The need to pay rent and getting
sure. But did money not make this platform easier in the way of these happening, like being able to make your own shirts on Teesprings, for instance, as you said, with merchandising platforms that take a percentage out of the payment that they give you, and realizing that they can do that? Is that not a way of being able to benefit the people using capitalism? Doesn't that in itself mean that it's necessarily in place to help people?
Totally disagree. I would agree a little bit, but I honestly feel like it's just not as helpful. Like, it's sure, I feel like if money wasn't required and money didn't exist, I feel like, and people had access to food and shelter and healthcare and stuff like that, YouTube would still develop, and then it wouldn't have to worry about advertising and things like that. We wouldn't have to watch our language. We wouldn't have to do stuff like that. And it would be better off overall. It's still, in spite of capitalism, I think that it develops, and it just sort of happens to work in some places. But I think that capitalism is more of an inhibitor overall.
Okay, that's fine. The only thing I would say to that is, depending on your point of time and where you want to draw this imaginary line that we're cutting off the point of capitalism not needed and whatnot, and innovation stopping because of this, or would happen because of that, depending on how far you go back, the reason why internet and stuff like that happened was mostly because that we needed to be able to interact with people on different sides of the world, for instance, and being able to trade with each other, being able to make sure that we can get our mangoes all nice and fresh and get them over as quickly as possible, or whatever, wherever, however. And that's the point. The reason why the world becomes so well known and so, some people would say, conquered. Yeah, globalized. Let's use that. Globalized is a much better term. It's because that we wanted things from different places. We wanted to trade with different things. Now, if we all were able to, which is physically impossible or scientifically impossible, we can't grow bananas in England, for instance, or in the Northern Hemisphere, for instance. So we'd always have to trade in some aspect. So with that idea of trading, for instance, in your aspect, you would trade thing for thing, or would you have some sort of intrinsic value placed between it?
Well, I think capitalism may have been necessary up to a certain point, because while gift economies were actually the norm for thousands of years, millions of years potentially. I don't know. Maybe not that long, but at least
tens of thousands. I would say tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands, yeah. Interacting with different cultures until the world was globalized, until we had technology and instant communication. There's always sort of the potential of somebody perhaps, negating your thing or being, swindled or invaded, perhaps, which is, also something that capitalism has promoted. But
I don't think capitalism is in fault for imperialism.
I think that it is, but we can get into that a little bit later.
Explain the Soviet Empire then.
The Soviet Empire. Okay, well, I don't consider the Soviets to be communist because they I know it's a meme.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that.
But the Soviet Empire, okay, but they were not. They were state capitalist in that the state owned basically all of the private industry. So because they were still trying to, benefit themselves and sort of generate something. Although also, again, I don't completely disagree that capitalism was a thing too, because I think that that's part of the reason that the Soviet Union failed was because they went straight from feudalism to an attempt at communism. And of course, they were also very heavily their odds were really against them. People were really trying to prevent them from doing that, especially foreign powers. So it kind of just is what it is. I don't know if capitalism is 100% necessary. It may be or it may not be, but it certainly is difficult to go from feudalism straight to communism, especially when other capitalist powers are putting pressure on you through military intervention to not do that.
Sure. I wasn't trying to ask you to defend what their economic system was. I was trying to get you to try and explain how under let's say a socialistic idealism, how that they decided that they were still going to take over different parts and colonize different parts of the world, i.e. Poland, Lithuania, the Eastern Bloc.
First of all, I'd like to say that because you have an example of another perhaps non-standard capital, like not capitalistic empire developing, that doesn't prove that capitalism is not imperialistic. But
you said it didn't.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I just want to make that clear for everybody who's listening. It's sort of, it's mainly because, from what I understand about the Soviets is they wanted, Stalin especially, he kicked out Trotsky and everybody because he wanted to have Russia, he wanted socialism in one country. And then after World War II, he kind of invaded and sort of established stuff in the satellite states more as a buffer than anything else. So it was more to sort of make it more difficult, more easy to defend the Russia and the USSR in general by having a wall of countries that are, allied with them or rather under their thumb in the way first. So I think that it's almost a sort of an extension of feudalism of being, they're the king and then they have these sort of, smaller powers that are subject to their will. And sort of, I don't know exactly, but I do
think that feudalism is the problem because most empires were created under the idea of feudalism rather than capitalism.
Yes, and capitalism only sort of developed from the plague. But I think that capitalism is still not the ideal. I think that it is definitely better than feudalism, I will say. But and in some ways it's actually almost worse too, because again, it incentivizes working yourself to death, which wasn't necessarily part of feudalism, but perhaps it's also just a different society. If we had feudalism with technology like this, we might still have that same issue. So I don't know for sure.
Ooh, Catholic theocracy.
Yeah. yeah. No, I don't know that. I would have to do more research and stuff like that. But I still find that capitalism is holding us back more than it is helping us at this point, for sure. I don't know 100% about the past, but I know I can say with confidence that today capitalism is now holding us back more than it is pushing us forward.
But I just gave you an example of how it pushed everybody forward. Everybody now can be more famous because of the inventions of enterprise to be able to buy things at cheaper rates and be able to push forward.
Yeah, but I also think that because you still need to buy stuff, that still like pushes back people's creativity and the ability to develop technology and stuff. Whereas because if you had that ability, if you could just go to the science lab and develop something or create an invention rather than have to secure the wealth to purchase those items, I think that it would be easier. It's just streamlined. It would be another barrier out of the way.
I don't see how.
Okay, well, what I'm basically trying to say is that feudalism was a box, capitalism is a bigger box, and then what I'm trying to do is open the box. Now that doesn't explain anything, but that's just telling you the sort of process that I'm thinking, which is that if you wanted to, well, think of it like this. If you wanted, I mean, right now the oil companies are probably some of the wealthiest people in the world. I mean, Bezos, I think, is the wealthiest person on earth, but he's not an oil or power person. But like, they have been incentivized through profits, and they've known since at least the 70s or 80s that they're creating global warming and making it worse and making the world less inhabitable for us humans. And instead of investing in, and the reason that they didn't invest in clean energy like they should have is because it's clean and comes from the sun, like solar energy and wind power. It is free, and you don't need to sell it. I mean, after we develop the technology,
no, you still need to. Even if you were to have it as a complete and utter wind farm, you'd still sell it for the point of using the dynamos, making sure people can fix it, stuff like that. It's not a case of it not being for free that they're not doing it. It's just that the fact is that for them at the minute, gas or petrol is still leaps and bounds at being able to produce more energy at a quicker rate and a cheaper rate than what solar energy or wind energy
not leaps and bounds. It's getting better all the time. They're catching.
I didn't say it's not. It's still leaps and bounds. It's still leaps and bounds. Look at California and how many times it's gone out, but had a blackout in the last month.
I would have to look that up. I'm not sure.
I believe it's around 8.
Solar energy is coming along quite nicely and catching up. But the thing is, once you put solar panels on, obviously it's tough to capture the energy still, I think. But what I'm saying is,
what's your take on nuclear?
Oh, I'm very for it. I'm completely for it. I think that's where we should be going. I think solar and wind are good, but I think nuclear is the way to go, especially thorium. Yeah.
What about hydrogen-powered cells for being able to take away petrol?
I don't see a problem with that either. I mean, unless there's a big inhibitive issue that I'm not aware of. I think
people claim Hindenburg.
Sorry. Okay. Oh my God. Yeah. Okay. So fuck. I mean, that's like saying that's like people. I mean, and it still happens, unfortunately. But that's, in my view, that's like saying, look at Chernobyl because of nuclear. It's like, okay, that happened in the 70s, in the 80s, like in the 60s, like that was, and Hindenburg much more like further in the past than even that. So it's like, okay, we could fix that. Like, we can learn from the past. We can learn. The thing is, I feel like the reason it's not being invested is because after it reaches its apex, it no longer really becomes profitable, because you could make it profitable by charging for it, but you really don't need to, because eventually it's so renewable and powerful. And eventually, I mean, if we ever, I don't know if it's possible, but obviously the goal would be fusion energy. But if
you mean fission, where nuclear energy itself is fusion already, you mean fission?
Maybe fission. Yeah, I don't know. The one I'm pretty sure it's fusion, but like I don't know. Maybe cold fusion is impossible. I don't know what the term is, but the one that they're trying to work now with the sort of toroidal field where they're taking I don't know. I think it's fusion. I mean, I may be having it backwards. I'm not sure. But let's see. Fusion energy is. I'm going to see if that means nuclear. I'm googling it right now.
It does mean nuclear.
Okay.
It does mean both of them mean nuclear. It just, one is the fusion where you have the two cells colliding together, which is what we use now, and fission is where you're fusing the neutrons and particles together.
I think you may be mistaken. I think it may be the other way around.
Probably. Yeah,
I think
possibly.
Fission, I think, is what happens in nuclear power plants, and fusion is Wikipedia. Fusion is a proposed form of power generation that would generate electricity using heat from nuclear fusion reactions, like in the sun. So it is the third word is proposed form of energy. So it has not been developed yet.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I got it the wrong way around.
That's fine. No worries.
Did you know that France derives about 75% of its electricity from nuclear energy?
Good for them.
No, I want them to do exactly the same for what they've just done in our country.
I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah.
It seems the way to go, but I really feel like especially in America, the oil companies are inhibiting research in that way because it will take away from their profits. For some reason that it seems less. I guess I don't know why I would invest in it, but I guess again, even if they were to invest in it, it would not return the same level of profits as oil does. And also, that's why America is at war, is for oil. I mean, we use the term war on terror, and obviously we don't want terrorism, but like, I think a lot of the terrorist cells are developed more from our invading their land and securing their oil rather than any hatred of our freedoms or whatever, which they might.
Depends on what places that you're talking about.
It does.
I do agree that there are, especially with places like Iraq, I do agree with you that most of the cells were sprung up after Saddam was put to the sword, so to speak.
Yeah.
But yeah, same as Colonel Gaddafi as well.
And that's sort of my main argument in terms of capitalism holding us back, is because if it really was, if capitalism really did encourage innovation, first of all, why would we have it encourages innovation, but only in terms of innovating ways of making profit. It does not encourage innovation for innovation's sake. It may have in the past, it may have resulted in some innovation for innovation's sake, whether that comes in spite of or because of capitalism. But I think as a rule, it does not innovate as much as just as taking away the profit motive would. And I think that if we move the motive from profit to...
Don't you think that they're intrinsically linked?
I don't. I used to think that, but I don't anymore, because, I mean, obviously, if you innovate, but if you were to come up with a engine that was, if you were to make cold fusion and break thermodynamics, let's just say, you would then it would make no sense to profit from it other than to perhaps sell it the way of making it. It's just like, once you do that,
the point of it.
Well, think of it like this. It makes more money to make iPhones that break after a year than it does to make an iPhone that lasts 5 years.
Yeah, and then they lose profits when people realize that their phones are breaking, and Hawaii is actually better than a fucking iPhone.
But then Android does the same thing. And then Samsung does the same thing, because again, it's always more profitable to create phones.
When Samsung had its bust up for the S7 or the S8 or whatever it was, I can't remember, the Note, that was the one, the Note 4 or whatever it was, or 5, where it kept on expanding and blowing up and whatnot.
Yeah.
And because they took such a hit on people not wanting to do it, their quality went straight up, and it's still up at the minute.
Okay, but why did they have to go to a point where they had exploding phones to start making their phones good? Like, why did they have to wait until they got to that point? Why didn't they just make good phones?
The reason why on that side, the reason why on that side of things is simply because they were rushing to be able to meet the deadline, and they didn't test the batteries properly in the transistor transformer.
Why do they need a deadline?
Yeah, but that's not to do with profits.
They need to have something out by this certain time, so that they need something out by Christmas, so that people buy phones for Christmas. You know, it's just like, it's like they don't need that. Capitalism is incentivizing cutting corners in that case, rather than innovation.
Yeah, and when they cut the corners, the innovation was then put back into place because people paid with their wallets and voted with their wallets and said, we're not buying shoddy fucking materials. So then the quality went back up.
Cut corners in the first place if it wasn't for the incentivizing, the profit. If they wouldn't have felt the need to cut corners, they would have just made good phones, and people would have. I mean, like another argument for capitalism is competition, but I don't see why you need to compete. I don't see why not just make the best thing you can and then give it to the world. Like, obviously we have IP because of. I'll let you talk.
Let's put competition to humanistic ideology first. So if I compete with you at running, or if I compete at you with computer games, for instance, like Call of Duty, and you keep on beating me all the time, I'm going to want to get better so that I can beat you. And if we play with other people, then that's also going to make me want to be better than the other people, because you're the pinnacle of Call of Duty or whatever. So if I can keep on getting closer to you and then overtake you, then I'll be the pinnacle. But I can't rest on my laurels because you or everybody else that's chasing me is going to be doing exactly the same thing. This is how innovation works on an industry level. Well, no, because even if I buy, because even if I buy you, because even if I buy you to say, oh, let me win, other people are still going to get better than me.
Yeah, potentially, but it depends on the startup. I mean, what if? I mean, it really. Capitalism can allow. I mean, obviously now this is why you're not a libertarian, but capitalism can incentivize just buying out competition and creating monopolies, which is something that stifles innovation. Which is why I'm sure part of the reason that you do not believe in unregulated capitalism. But I
can argue it.
Yeah, but
I'm with you, but I can argue it.
Well, I want to go back to, I mean, yeah, you say, look, so if somehow, if playing Call of Duty well made money, then people would, want to be the best thing.
Well, it does. But it does. Call of Duty does make you money.
It could, yeah, I know. It doesn't, I mean, being good at Call of Duty doesn't intrinsically make you money, but it could be turned into something that would make you money. Now, my question is, why not just play Call of Duty? Like, why do you need to be good at it to make money? Why not just be good at it because you want to? I don't understand. Like competition is kind of unnecessary, in my opinion. Like, I think that obviously innovation is important, but people will innovate anyway. People will compete and make a better thing anyway, not just because it makes
Forget the innovation part. Forget the innovation part. Forget the money part. Why is competition, in your opinion, I say a bad thing because I can't remember the word you used?
Unnecessary.
Yeah,
I think it is unnecessary because, okay, let's say we have computers, right? Obviously we do. So right now we develop making faster computers and more powerful computers because when you sell them, they'll make you money. But people still like computers just because they like computers, and people will develop better computers because they like computers. They will just do it. Like,
sure.
That's what we do. We create things. And so
sure, but that's the money incentive. Hang on just a second. That's the money incentive for making it. Now let's go back to the competition side. Forget the money, forget the economics. If I, for instance, bought an Apple and the Apple was really good, but I could build a computer that was 10 times better than it, I probably can't. But say I could, and I built that computer and I was able, and more people would want that computer. Forget the money side of it. They would want that computer more than the other computer simply because it's a better computer. That's competition.
Now, what about all the people that could also make a 50 times better computer, but can't afford to learn how to do it because they can't
make it.
Yeah. Then humanity
they can't make it.
Loses out.
No, they don't. It's a simple case that if you don't know how to do something, if you don't know how to do something, you can't say that, well, I could make that 50 times better. It's like me saying, well, I could fly. I could. Just because I can't do that, though. There's just certain things that I can't do. I can't run a mile within 3 minutes. It's physically impossible at the minute for any human to do that.
Okay,
but what if I could?
What if the ability to run was gatekept by how much you could afford to run on the track? Like, I mean, we could
not.
Okay, but
even using the computer side of thing. But even using the computer side of thing and going back to the point of, if you knew how to build it, you would be able to build it. If you haven't got the money to build it, that's different.
Yeah, you would never learn how to use it or how to build it if you never even had the chance, because you had a minimum wage job and you had to worry about rent and food all the time, and you never even got the opportunity.
Again, if we take, that's fine. Again, if we take everything that you've just said, we use your idea of what you said before. If I don't want to do computers, but I could still build that, I'm still not going to be able to build a computer. Just saying that, well, because the opportunity is not there for that person or they didn't take it, that doesn't mean anything. I have the opportunity to do almost anything that I want to, but can I physically do it? Do I have the mental aptitude to do it? And am I capable of doing it? Those are the three things that you need to look at, not just the capability of doing it.
Or can you afford to get the capability to do it? That's what I'm sort of saying. Some people have the potential.
But you're focusing on that bit.
Because I think it's an important bit. I mean, yeah. Obviously, if I have the potential to learn how to build computers, I do, but I don't go to school for it. That's my problem. But if I want to do that, but I can't afford to go to school for it, that's capitalism getting in my way, not me.
Not necessarily, because you could get a job, you could work around it, you could get an apprenticeship.
Well, or I mean, maybe, but again, maybe I would never have the opportunity because I would never really have access to a computer because I was born to a poor family. And so we maybe had a computer, but it was old and I didn't really use it very much. Whereas if I had access to computers my whole life, perhaps I would be interested in them and I just never learned that I would like them.
Again, that comes down to your personal, living choices and arrangements. Now,
but you don't
if you were able, you don't choose to be born where you're born. You don't choose to be born where you're born. You don't choose your color. You don't choose your race. You don't choose your hair.
Exactly. That's my point.
Yeah, but so no, you're literally arguing a point you can't argue. Then you're literally arguing a point you can't argue. If you just agreed with me that you're arguing the same logic and same point of you can't choose your race, you can't choose where you're born, and you can't choose how you're born, then you're arguing a point that you can't argue with.
No, because what I'm saying is you cannot choose your income level that you're born into. That's another thing.
No, but you can change your income level.
Possibly, but it's a lot harder than people say.
No, definitely. Nobody is ever no. Nobody is ever the same income level as they are when they were a child.
Mm-hmm. So here's what I'm saying. Why is it that we what is better about potentially having that hill to climb in your way versus just being able to go to school for computers? What makes it better about having to work in a potentially unrelated field in order to accumulate enough money to afford to try that versus being able to just do that?
Well, you can just do that, but I understand your point. Let me address the question. Let me address the question.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The reason why it goes that way, and the reason why it is better this way, is because when it comes to the point of you deciding that you want to do something, you're going to follow through with what you've decided to do. So say, for instance, I've just wanted to start learning computers because I find it interesting, or I want to go and do counseling because I find it interesting. I've got the option of switching and choosing what I actually want to do. Where if I have to pay for the course in which I'm doing, and I have to put effort into doing the course to pass it and to do it, I'm going to finish that goddamn course because I want to and I need to. Rather than, I don't really need to. I can just do this instead.
Yeah. Okay.
You're incentivized to do it.
Let's take this as an example. Okay. So let's say you have the potential and the passion to work for computers, but you are doing really well in, say, a forensics class, and you are really good, and then you get a scholarship for forensics. You want to do computers and you can't afford to go to school, but you have to go to forensics. Now, of course, you could go to school for forensics. You don't really want to do it, but you have a talent for it. You do it, you become a forensics criminologist, and then you use that money to eventually go to school to become proficient in computers, and then you can do it that way. That's possible, but why is that better? Why is that better than not just having the ability to go to computers from the get-go?
Because you did have if you had the ability to be able to go in and do the criminology.
You could not afford school. You had to get a scholarship, and the scholarship was for criminology.
But your scholarship, you wouldn't. What you're saying that when you get a scholarship, that you're forced into the scholarship that you get, or you don't choose a scholarship in what you go into. So if you get given a scholarship,
I'm not super familiar with scholarships, but imagine if you really like computers, but you were still your education wasn't providing what you needed, and so you weren't passing enough to get the grades that you needed to get a scholarship for computers, but you got a scholarship to a different school for another major.
From my understanding, now I could be completely and utterly wrong, I thought the scholarship was a case of giving you permission to be able to join the college or university for a particular reason, and you were able to do certain classes of your choice.
From what I understand, there are scholarships like that, but there are also scholarships that are for specific majors and things like that.
Aren't they specifically sought after, though? Aren't they specifically sought after that? If I want a scholarship for law, I'm specifically going after law.
Yeah, I guess. But even so, even if that wasn't the case, I still don't see why needing scholarships at all. Like why we should.
So people don't have to pay the money to be able to do what they want to and be able to follow their dreams.
Yeah,
but they know what they want. But they know what they want.
Yeah, but I think you should go to what if you think you want law and you go through it and you get the scholarship and you're halfway through it and you realize you hate law. You're like, what you were saying
would have done pre-law.
Follow through. Yeah, but this happens to people. It does. Like you think you got it. You're a big fish in a small pond. You move on to the next grade.
Sure, all you do is you lose your scholarship. You then get another job, and then you go on and you do another thing that you pay for yourself, or take a loan out.
Yeah, I see. That just seems like a lot of unnecessary work and risk.
Why? It's no more so than, oh, I just want to decide that I'm not doing this today.
I go into law because I want to, or I don't know what I would go into for whatever. I go into, forensic psychology or something like that. And then I decide I don't like it and I want computers. So I just switch over to computers and then I'm good. No money.
I'm pretty sure that in a lot of cases that you can change. I'm pretty sure that in a lot of cases you can actually change mid-semester in your first semester.
Okay, but I'm saying, I don't know. I mean, like, I don't understand why, why are we, like, college doesn't need to be expensive. It doesn't need, and a lot of the money that goes into, especially the high level Ivy League schools, is not really great. Like it's kind of wasted. It's not used as it could be. And
yes, the Ivy League. Hang on, just 1 second. The Ivy League schools that are world renowned, known for being top class institutions of learning, aren't worth it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in some cases, no, they aren't. But in some cases they are. But I'm just saying, like, I'm pretty sure. I mean, yeah, like a lot of times, like you can get into Yale if your parents are rich and they buy a wing of Yale, and then you get a Yale on your on your transcripts.
Sure,
it's like,
and that costs them a lot of money to do absolutely fuck all, and that's up to them. Or you could work really hard and you can get a scholarship and come from literally dirt broke poor and be able to get into Yale.
The Ivy Leagues are based on their denial level. Like they're ranked based on how many people they don't let in.
Do you know this how?
That's the truth. I'm pretty sure that I've heard that. Hold on, let's see. I don't know what I would search for that, but it is an important thing. Like they take a point of pride how many people they don't let in.
Taking a point of pride of how many people they don't let in doesn't mean that they're geared up to count how many people they don't let in. It's like an establishment that's high end that says, oh, we only let high class people in. That doesn't mean that you intrinsically want to keep everybody out. It just means that you want your place to be a high end place.
Well, you want it to be exclusive, but it's just like I don't think exclusionary ideas in education are good. I think education should be accessed to everybody. Everybody should have equal opportunity.
Are the Ivy Leagues turning away your access to education?
Yes, if you are A, not able to afford them, B, not under their scholarship list, or C, I mean, obviously, if you can't.
So they're not going out of their way to exclude you. If you had what they need for you as a prerequisite, you could get in.
Probably. I'm sure they deny people that could get in anyway. I mean, so I've heard, I mean, I don't know if this is true, but I read somewhere that they will try to get people to interview and apply to them just so they can deny them, so they can inflate their denial numbers.
I'd have to see that, but that would more be of a case of a personal ego rather than it being an Ivy League ego.
Well, it's the Ivy League. They gain their ego by their denial numbers, by how many people they exclude.
Again, I would have to see where you'd get that from, because that sounds more of personal incredulity more than it being an actual fact, if I'm being honest.
Schools deny. I don't know what I would say. I don't know what I would have to Google for that, unfortunately. But anyway, my thing is why I just don't understand why how it's better to make it difficult to get educated or something, or difficult to switch your primary purpose.
What's difficult about getting A's in your class if you're good at your class? Because I'm assuming that in your access that you would have to have a form of entry level to be able to start off from, say, as you said before, your university level. You would have an entry level test or something, wouldn't you?
Kayla says she looked it up. Ivy League schools are literally just Ivy League because a group of schools that do sports together. So I don't know. Maybe Ivy League is not the definition.
That's it.
Yeah, but again, they're still very prestigious.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, but it's like they're prestigious, I think, for less than ideal reasons. I think that they are overly. I think that they are overrated.
Literally, most of the people that are of any sort of form of stature, especially in the US, come from your Ivy League schools.
Well, yeah, but it's also, I mean, again, you can Ivy League. You can also. I think we're going away from the topic. My point is, I feel like education should be free and it should be accessible to everybody, and you should be allowed to change. What it sounded like, if I may steelman or restate what your argument is that these sort of exclusionary things keep people on track and keep people from, flippantly leaving. Is that correct?
In an essence, but it's more of a case of their prerequisites. It's like if you would say that to join a course, you would have to do an entry-level test to be able to make sure that you have a form of aptitude to be able to do it. Then this is just another form of aptitude test. You have to make sure that you meet this requirement before you can do this thing.
It's more, well, for my example of entry-level tests, it's not to see if you can get in, it's to see where you are, to see where we should put you, which is kind of the same thing, but it's not to exclude you. It's just to see, like, okay, you're not there yet. But you will eventually be able to get there.
Well, that's what they're saying. You can go to a community college to up your levels afterwards. You can apply for it next year. They're not saying once you've applied once, you can never apply for it again.
But it's just it's student debt is one of the only loans that you cannot be dealt with if you go bankrupt.
Yeah, I understand.
And it's like I don't think that that's fair. I think that's almost, I mean, immoral. I don't see why education should be gated by anybody. I think everybody should have access to whatever level of education they require.
Well, they do. They just have to pay for it. They have access to it. They're not being turned away from it. You just have a prerequisite. Their prerequisite is different to what you state that you want it to be.
But I don't think a prerequisite should be the ability to accumulate enough wealth to buy that education.
But that's not their limitation. Their main points are, if you have good grades, you get scholarships.
But not everybody.
Not, you can pay.
It's often just the.
No, I agree. I agree. But you're stating that what you have to do to get into any university is pay, which it isn't. Their prerequisite mostly is the case of, if you get these grades, you can come into the university and learn. If not, you can pay an extra tuition fee to be able to get this.
I think that if you are third in your class and cannot afford it, you still should be able to get it. And whereas
that's a separate discussion. That's literally a separate discussion. That's talking about the prerequisites that they actually state and stand for. That's not trying to completely get rid of it.
I think I don't necessarily have a problem with grades. I think that, I mean, for certain classes, but I still think you should be able to take a class even if you're totally unprepared for it and fail out. I think that you should have that opportunity.
Why?
Because who knows? Maybe you'll get it, or maybe you need to learn that perhaps this is not what you think it is.
Sure, maybe the point of having the price tag beforehand.
I think people need the opportunity to fail and not be punished for it.
But yet they would be punished for it because they wouldn't be able to get the class done. They would fail the class.
Yeah, and then they would take a simpler class.
Yeah, sure, but that's still exactly what would happen. That's still exactly what would happen in today's climate.
I disagree, because again, they would still be out money that they would not be able to return.
Oh, so it's the money that's the problem, not the fact of actually having a prerequisite. Or failing.
Yeah, it really, I mean, my main issue is money. I think that, I think education should be accessible to everybody. And that, again, you should have the opportunity to fail, because that's how innovation happens, is people learn from their mistakes.
Okay, so does that mean that you should force the teachers to teach for free?
In the sense that their food and shelter is already covered, as well as their health care and things like that. Yeah, I believe in a moneyless society. That's my ideal. So I think that, you should teach because you want to teach. Not because you're getting paid. Teachers are already valued. Teachers already don't get paid enough.
Oh, no, I agree with you on that one. But But you're saying that with a lot of teachers do it because they care, and I'm not saying that they don't, but a lot of teachers do it because it's a job, and a lot of teachers absolutely, excuse my French, but fucking hate their job because of how they have to deal with some children and how they overreact and so on and so forth.
So they shouldn't be teachers. So other people should be teachers instead. They should
But
be.
my point was that if you took that away, then the number of teachers would decrease, not increase.
I think temporarily it might, but it would eventually even out.
I don't think it would, because if you had the choice of, as you said beforehand, if you had the choice of going into a class and going, yeah, I can't be asked to deal with fucking Timmy today because he's just keeps on trying to throw stuff at me and I just don't like it. Well, fuck it, I'm just going to leave.
Doesn't want to be there either. So Timmy, but that's the other part. That's the other side of my coin, is that school is no longer compulsory. It's open to everybody, but it's also not compulsory. So Timmy doesn't have to be there either. So
when you say that you want to create a society that has smart, intelligent people, you're not, because you're saying that kids don't have to go to school at all.
It might be counterintuitive, but I think that making education something that you choose to do would develop more intelligent people, because again, they wouldn't be forced to do it, so they wouldn't be there.
No. I agree with you. I agree with you, because the classes would be smaller, that the people that do want to go would be more intelligent because they have more time there. But as you all know from your own experience, I imagine, in your life, and I can give my own experience on this one, I would have said around about 60% of the people didn't want to be at school.
So get
why
rid
would
of
six?
Let them come.
Well, fine. Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Get rid of 40% that's left would have so much more opportunity to succeed and improve the world themselves.
Great. That means that you just said 60% of all kids that go to school that don't want to go to school are now just thrown on a trash heap and not educated at all and have low-level education.
They want to. They're not.
What if they don't ever want to? Do you think that people...
I think the amount of people that would never ever seek education is so minuscule that they could be completely dealt with. I think that people would eventually choose. I mean, now, yeah, but again, the reason people don't like school is because they're forced to go, or because it's
no. People don't like school because they don't like learning new things. A lot of people don't like it. A lot of people don't like the idea of a form of institution. That doesn't mean that they don't like it because they're forced to go. It means that they don't like it because it's a form of institution that they're being told that they have to stay there for a particular number in a day, finish the class off, finish this off. A lot of people don't like that sort of stuff, so they want to go off and do their own thing, especially when you're a child.
Yeah, but then as they mature and grow up, they tend to want to go back. I mean, a lot of times in basic income experiments, a lot of people go to school.
Yes, they go to college. They don't go back to school. Yeah. Do you reckon that people that are in their, let's say 12-year-olds want to go back to school from when they were 5 and go into classes with 5-year-olds?
That was something that I covered earlier. Grades would not be based on age; they'd be based on.
It's not a case of that. It's a case of reading level and aptitude level. Not even a case of grading level.
First of all, school would be compulsory until 12, so the 12-year-olds wouldn't have to go back into 5-year-old classes.
I understand.
Would a 30-year-old want to go to a 12-year-old class? Probably not. But guess what? You have the option to, and no one would. It would be societally okay. You wouldn't be the only one there. Just like how there's 30-year-olds that hang out with 18-year-olds in college, there could be 30-year-olds.
My point isn't about how creepy it is. Our point isn't about how creepy it is. It's a point of people don't want to do that. They don't feel comfortable going in with children and being outshone by the children. It shows them up in a bad light. Humanity and humans don't like that.
Well, that sounds like their problem. I feel like. I mean, that sounds like another.
This whole conversation could be summed up as it's your problem and you don't like money.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
No. I disagree, because again, the embarrassment that comes from going back to school, I think, would be overshadowed with people encouraging them and being proud of them for doing that, even though they seem older.
Do you not think that people do that now, even if it is compulsory?
Yeah, but it costs money.
No, not only up to a point. Up to 16, it doesn't cost a thing.
That's true, unless but
not unless you go private yourself already, but that's your decision.
Or you are born into an inner city and you go to an inner city school that isn't well funded and the institutions aren't good and you don't have good access to stuff. So not only do most people not like school, but it's also you have a shitty school to go to.
Sure, but do they have to pay for it?
No, but I don't.
That's my point. Your point was that they have to pay for education up to the age of 16.
Okay.
They don't.
So let's take that away, but they should still have the same equal. They should have the same resources as people in a wealthy community that also don't have to
I'm
pay.
glad that you changed it. I'm glad that you changed it to resources, because if you were going to have the same equal opportunity, you'd have to be taught by the same teacher at every single class or every single person.
No, you would just have to be taught by an equally apt teacher, an equally capable teacher. You don't have to be the same teacher.
There's always going to be differences. There's always going to be differences.
I think that people are focusing too much on that minutia. It's almost like it sounds like it's kind of like, you know, we're slow to adopt roundabouts in America because we already have roads that don't have roundabouts, and I don't know what the reasoning is, but they're safer, they're better, and people just think of, but they're like, oh, but they're worse in this one aspect, even though they're better in 5 different aspects, but they focus unfairly on that one aspect that perhaps they're worse, and it sounds like that's what you may be doing in my perspective.
No. My point is that you're trying to say that people would like to go to school and they would choose to, and even by your own admission, that you would end up losing up to, not necessarily the actual figure, but up to 60% of the children that wouldn't want to go to school, and you'd be okay with that.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's the thing. Let me sum it up then, and using those words. So 60% of people, roughly, don't want to go to school, so they take some time off. The 40% remain, and they get more attention to them, more resources given to them, more efficiently distributed because they have access to that. They move on. Later on, half of those 60% of people decide to go back. And then they, again, have those resources and things like that. So it's just different timings. A large portion of those people, perhaps less than, more than, or equal to half of those people that left, would go back later on.
Well, let's say 30% then. 30% of children that go to school in your population, you're happy to throw in a trash heap.
By trash heap, I mean have access to food, clothing, house, healthcare, and education if they ever decide to pursue it. I don't consider that a trash heap. I consider that
because they don't have education.
Yeah, but they're benefiting from the rest of society. So they're
benefiting how? They don't even know how to read or write.
They would know how to read or write. They'd have a 12.
How if they don't? How if they don't go to school?
They'd have
how if they don't go to school?
They'd have a 12-year-old education. They'd be able to.
Oh, read. You're saying that they have to go to school up to 12-year-old. It's compulsory now for them to go to school to 12.
That's what we've been saying. It's compulsory until 12. After that, it's no longer.
Oh, okay.
That's what I've been saying from the beginning. Sorry if that was. Oh my gosh, that changes a lot. I suppose then. Yeah. No.
A little bit. But even after that. After that, how do you get all the GCSE levels and everything else like that, or what you would call the equivalent of in your country for the high school diploma, as in the last and the highest and the most complicated aspects of English, maths, science, just the STEM fields, let alone the arts, let alone music, let alone all the other aspects that you'd be learning at that point.
The only degree that you would need would be the 12-year-old degree, and then after that, you would pursue whatever.
That's not my point. No, that's not my point. The reason why it goes to around about 16, 18, depending on where you are and whatnot, is because of the.
Anyway, also, I'm open to 12 not being like absolute.
So what would be your cutoff point then? Because it depends.
My cutoff point would be 12, but perhaps older would be better. Perhaps 15, 16 might be the way it is. In America, it's 18. I think most people. I mean, some people graduate at 16, but most people graduate around 18. Now. It would be whatever the society decided. But my guess, my shot in the dark cutoff point would be 12 or 13. And
why would you pick 12 or 14? Just out of curiosity.
Because by then you can read and do basic math and other such things, and you have access to, you're older and you're a little bit more mature. You're not a full adult yet, but you can start to make.
I was never mature at 13. I was still climbing trees and deciding to jump from them.
I mean, I still do that today. It's like, I don't see. I think that 13-year-olds would have that. While they're not considered legal adults, but I think that they can they know what they like and they know what they're interested in. But also they would, at any point in their life up to, death, you would be able to go back to school for free and pursue anything you want. So, they could go out of school.
You can do that now, right? Except for free.
Not for free. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's what I said. Except for free, but they can go back to school, college, go to community college, at night school, whatever.
Why is it better that it's not free? Like, why?
Because then you decide that you're going to go and do it, and you generally will have more chance of finishing something that you know that you paid for, rather than not finishing something that you haven't. Now, let me put this in a simpler term very quickly. Most people, if you are given a dinner, will leave parts of a dinner. Now, most people that are paying for dinner will necessarily force themselves to finish it because they've paid for it.
Okay. And if you go to a buffet for free, most people actually take less.
Sure.
Yeah. So
but that's not the point that I'm making with the analogy. I'm not trying to make it an all-encompassing analogy.
Is it better that you clean your plate if you're already full?
That's not the point I was making again. The reason why I'm saying that they force themselves to finish the plate is not because, you need to make sure that you're full. It's to say to make sure that you stay the course. Even if you don't necessarily like it or even enjoy it, you make sure that you finish it, because then you can do something else afterwards.
I kind of think I understand what you're saying, and that people might be too quick to jump out as soon as they meet adversity. Yeah. And there would be people like that. But there would be, I
imagine, a majority.
Yeah. And then they leave, and then, they decide, okay, that wasn't for me. I'll try something else, or maybe I can try it again later on, knowing what the adversity will be. And then the people who do stay get the benefit, and then they get more attention and resources.
Sure, and then you have the people that have already left, that have got no better than what they are, realizing that they can dilly-dally and not worry about anything.
They're no better, but they're also no worse.
No, but society as a whole would be, because even people that don't like the job that they're doing still provide an actual job and partial to society. People that drive around delivery trucks may not like their jobs and maybe even fucking hate them, but they're integral to society and how it's done. If you give them not an easy way out, but saying, you don't have to do that, then society won't get things delivered.
Well, we would also make delivery, perhaps, if you don't like doing it, you do it for a little while and then you're done, and then your job is replaced by someone else.
You would rotate that. You would rotate delivery people and not expect to lose retention.
Undesirable jobs would be filled on rotation and volunteer basis until they could be automated, and then they would no longer need to be filled.
Sure, but then that goes with everything, and even in a capitalist society, that's what would happen eventually.
But the problem is, when you automate an even undesirable job, people become out of work.
Yeah, and that would happen in your society as well.
Yeah, but they wouldn't. But then, that would be a good thing instead of a bad thing.
Why would being out of work just because that you have what you say, trying to say that you would have food and stuff like that? Why would that be a good thing? Them not working?
Because they don't want to do the job. They would find something else to do, because that job.
We're talking about automation. We're not talking about Danny lost his job because he didn't want to do it anymore. We're talking about Danny lost his job because automation come in.
Exactly. So someone's cleaning toilets, right? Nobody wants to clean toilets, and then
my missus loves being a cleaner. My missus absolutely loves being a cleaner.
Well, good for her. I'm happy for you both. But let's say, okay, I use the term cleaning toilets because most people consider that to be undesirable. But you just proved my point. Some people would desire a bit. Some people would volunteer to do it anyway. And
she wouldn't volunteer. She wouldn't volunteer to do it. She doesn't have to do it. She won't do it.
Okay, but you said she enjoys doing it. Does she not enjoy it?
She enjoys doing it when she's asked to do it, yes. And when she's being paid for it, because she likes to go down to the coast and get stuff.
Ask her to do it, and people like her to do it. She would enjoy to do it until it became automated, and then she no longer has to be asked to do it anymore.
Yeah, then she would no longer do it, would she? And she would no longer ever have the chance of doing it if she so liked it. Because it's automated. She would never have the chance of doing it again, would she?
She could still do it at home. You could turn the automated machine off. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be done automatically.
No, but she would like to be. Do you know a lot of people that actually like to get into their car, travel to work, do their job, and then travel back home? They like to get out of the house.
No, I think labor and work is very important. I'm just saying that you would be doing it because you wanted to do it, not because you had to do it.
A lot of people do that already. They do it because they like doing it. A lot of people pick the jobs that they do because they like it.
A lot of people, but most people don't. Most people pick jobs because they have to do them.
I disagree. Most people settle with the job that they have because they actually don't mind doing the job. They may not be ecstatic about it. I'm not saying that they do, but most people settle with the job because they get used to it.
Yeah, but again, in my society, they could leave at any point and try something else, and somebody else would fill it in. Or if it's undesirable, or even if it is desirable, we could still automate it. But there would still be no reason to. There would still be nothing preventing people from doing it themselves if they wanted to. Like if I wanted a chair, I could go to IKEA and have a computer made chair. Or if somebody wanted to make chairs, I could get one of their chairs too. And it would still be nice to have their, it would still be a lot of their, there would still be a market per se of people doing handmade things. However, they would be doing it because this person would be making chairs because they like to make chairs. They like to make furniture. And then, they could keep it, or they could say, here, I'm done. Anyone who wants it can have it. And then somebody would have it. Now, you could say that, well, now there's, if I want a handmade chair, there's no immediate way to do it. Whereas right now I have money and I could immediately wait to do it. And you're right. But it's not like there are people who there's no shortage of craftsmen in the world, especially when they're not inhibited doing things that they don't want to do. And all they do all day is create craft. Then
do you think that craftsmen themselves would carry on doing crafting if they weren't getting paid for it? And I'm not talking about... I'm not talking... Yeah, they enjoy doing the work, but if they don't have to do the work, they won't do it.
I mean, have you ever... I mean, do you know the artists need to create?
Yes, there is such thing as a artist need to create.
Yeah.
Yes, that's individual, not as a group. You can't say that all crafts people would carry on crafting handmade stuff or build blacksmith or whatever because that they like doing it. A lot of people don't mind doing their job and enjoy doing the crafting, sure. That doesn't mean that they would do it afterwards if they don't have an incentive to get paid for it.
The incentive would be it's up to them, or perhaps people desire it and they want to do it to fulfill those people's desires or their own desires. Again, chairs would still be made. They would be able to be automated and made. If you wanted a really nice chair made by an artist, it would be up to the artist. And you know what? That's a fundamental, perhaps, disagreement that we have. Because
the fundamental disagreement that we have is that you would say that if I come up to you and ask you to do it, that you have, and I agree with you, every right to say, no, you don't want to do it. Where if I come up to you and say, look, how much are the materials? How much is this? I'll pay you for your time. Mm-hmm. You're more likely to go, yeah, I'll do that or trade. Let's use trade instead. I'll trade you this, and this for it. Rather than it just being, oh, well, can you do it for me? No, I don't really feel like it today, mate. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that. Whereas it sounds like you might. I think that if somebody likes to make craft, I think I understand what you're saying, which is that, if I don't feel like making a chair today and somebody asks me to make a chair and there's no money, I'm not going to make a chair. And you know what? That person can get a chair somewhere else. If they really want a handmade desk or chair, they could find it perhaps from someone else. If they really want it from me, it's up to me. And right now, they can incentivize me with money. They can incentivize me with money, but
that's not my point.
Okay.
My point would be that your incentivization isn't there. Not that him trying to incentivize you is there. The point would be you don't have to do anything whatsoever. So why would you do anything apart from I've got a little bit of a twinkling in my hand today, I'm just going to build something out of the blue? Because if somebody comes up to you and asks you, then you're probably not going to do it.
How long can you do nothing? How many days or weeks in a row can you do nothing?
Depends on what you classify as nothing. Remember at the beginning of the conversation, you said that we have to get used to getting bored?
No, my thing would be, yeah, exactly. I think getting bored would be an incentive to do something. And I think that it is a more ethical and better overall incentive I think it's a more ethical incentive than you will starve or become homeless if you don't do something. I think it is better to wait until someone is bored and then they want to do something for the sake of doing it rather than for their own survival and need to, or perhaps, at someone else's benefit.
Can I ask you a question? If you had the choice of, I don't know, having this conversation or being able to go down the coast with your family or friends or whoever you would choose to go down with you, what would you choose?
Well, I mean, it depends on the context. I mean, if I really
Just
had
in general,
yeah, like if I mean today, like yeah, no, I again I would choose this probably because this is what I want.
I wouldn't. I'd be down the coast every single decision, every single time, because there's a difference between being bored and doing something. Because if I can find a way of keeping myself busy, going to theme parks, going to coast, going to a pub, going wherever, if I kind of find a way of keeping myself occupied, I don't need to be a craftsman. I don't need to craft that chair. I don't want to craft it because I can go to the coast instead.
And then people like me would fill up where you don't.
Are you any good at making chairs?
Someone else would. I mean, are you any good at making chairs? Let me look. I've gone to the coast before. I can go every day I want to. Today we have an interview. Why are you doing it now? May I ask? Can you not go?
I don't have the money to go to the coast at the minute.
Okay. So I was thinking walk down the road, or if you lived near a beach or something like that. You were specifically thinking of Madagascar or whatever, right?
Yeah, Maldives. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Maldives. So, okay, but you've been to the Maldives like for a month or two now. You could, and your computer allows you to video chat with me at any time. You could be at the Maldives right now and just took 2 hours out of your day or less, to be honest, because I asked you ahead of time if you wanted to do a specific amount of time. Sure. And yeah, so I mean, I don't see why you couldn't do both.
Because I didn't have the money to go and do both.
Exactly, but in my society, you wouldn't need the money. You'd be able to.
Yeah, but if I was down the coast, why the hell would I be talking to anybody else? I'd be spending time with my family. That's the whole reason for going down on holiday and doing whatever, isn't it? Otherwise, why else would I stay in the Maldives? Not unless I'm emigrating to it.
Well, would you emigrate if you had the opportunity?
No.
Okay, then when you're done.
Sorry?
Then when you're done having time in the Maldives and you're open to the idea of having a conversation with someone, then I would have it. Otherwise, I would find someone else to talk to.
Well, I can go somewhere else. The point is, I wouldn't emigrate to the Maldives because my family's here. But that doesn't mean that I would still have the conversation or do the work for you or with you afterwards.
I mean, it sounds like you're saying you personally wouldn't want to do it, and that's a fair argument. But there's
no. That's not my argument at all. My whole argument is the case of you're trying to say that people would get bored, so they would do the work because they're bored, in essence.
Well, okay.
True. And my point is to that is, no, they wouldn't, because if everything is free and everything is able to be done and everything is able to be achieved, then why the hell would I work or do anything that I don't want to do when I can do everything that I want to do? I can go take drugs, I can go drink, I can go dancing, I can do what the hell I want. I don't need to talk to you, don't need to do this chair, I don't need to do anything.
Okay. And yes, I believe that there would be a portion of society that would do that. However, I think most of those people would be considered depressed because they are not participating in society, and they would have access to therapy and mental health, and they would be promoted and encouraged to go out and do things outside of their comfort zone.
So you think people that go out and enjoy going out every weekend are depressed?
No. Okay, let me rephrase that. I was thinking people who do nothing and sit at home all day playing video games or something.
That's not what I'm saying, am I? I'm saying that people in your society will have the option of doing absolutely anything that they wanted to do. Go do skydiving, go jump off of a cliff, base jumping. They can do literally anything that they wanted, go anywhere that they wanted. Why the hell would I make you a chair if I can go and base jump?
Okay, so you base jump. And you skydive, and you ride a roller coaster. Then you go to the beach. Then you go to perhaps a different place. You visit mountains. You climb mountains. You do all that. Eventually, you've done everything. Eventually you'll just, you'll be like.
Eventually, I've done everything and been everywhere when I'm like, what, 70, 80?
Potentially. I mean, medical technology would be better. I'm sure life extension wouldn't be an issue. I mean, all medical technology is life extension technology. So I think that we would have it because people would be nurses and doctors because they want to, not because they are paid, but they would be. And of course, we would also.
Yeah, and a lot of the nurses and doctors would shrink in number as well. Again, the same as the teachers.
Again, there is a possibility, but I would still think that your estimate of the amount of jobs that would go down is way less than it actually, or is way more than it would actually be. Because again, people would still do things. We still would follow the creed of from each according to their ability to each according to their need until it could be automated. Because we would then, rotate. We would say, we need doctors. Who wants to be a doctor? Okay, let's get you to school. Let's have you do it.
Do you think a lot of people would do the time that it takes to become a doctor if they weren't getting paid? And yes, I do understand that there will be people that would do it for the love of it. I do get that. Or the enjoyment or the intrigue of doing it. I do get it. There will be doctors, but nowhere near to the numbers where would be able to look after a society or a nation.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think I disagree. I think that we could encourage them. We say, look, we need doctors.
Do you know how hard it is to get doctors now to do the training, even with the incentivization of the money?
It's pretty tough. And you know what?
Why would I do it if I'm not even getting paid for it? And I've got no incentive to do it.
Because it needs to be done. The incentive is we need doctors.
I don't care if it needs to be done. I only cared about being able to get the money. Why would I care about doing the job if I'm not getting anything out of it?
I mean, because you could be a doctor for 20 years and then stop. Like, it's like, because again, it would,
until it's still have to take 10 years to train to be a doctor in a specialty.
Yeah. And so would a bunch of other people. It's like, again, it's not just you, it's everybody.
See, you're saying that I'm overestimating how many people like their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And you say that I'm wrong in the fact that many people like their jobs because they like their jobs. If I'm wrong in my assessment that people like their jobs, as you said and the chat said, if I'm wrong that people don't like their jobs without the incentive, why would they do them?
Because again, they need to be done. I mean, and again, some people like them. Now you're right. Now again, the jobs that people don't like are not doctors' jobs. Like, I mean, like, again, those jobs are very stressful because there's not enough of them. And you're absolutely right. I think we would say, look, we need doctors. We would make it as easy as possible to find your profession, find where you're good and put you in there. We would make it as simple and streamlined as possible because we need doctors, again, until we can supplement that with automated machines. We already have medical robots. We could make even more medical robots. We could have a lot of things. Let's see. Let's see. Having medical needs met is not an incentive strictly for them. That's a utopian socialist view. So it sounds like perhaps this person disagrees with me. Let's see. Okay, and I disagree. I think that we would people get their needs met. I mean, doctors would be made. I think that we would have it. It's a lot of work. You're absolutely right. Not everybody would want to do it. In fact, there would probably be a very strict minority that would want to do it. But we would say, look, we need doctors. And again, we would even perhaps have a draft. I mean, again, it's not efficient.
So you'd be forcing people now via a draft to be doctors, even if they don't want to.
That would be a last resort, but it would be.
Just one second. You're saying that you would draft people into becoming doctors even if they don't want to be, where I'm saying that if you want to be a doctor, you have the incentive to put money and time into it to get money and time out of it. Do you think that me giving that option to people is more intrinsic to freedom than what you've just said?
If everybody had the opportunity to try, we would end up...
Everybody does. You just need the aptitude and the intelligence to be able to do it, and the grades.
Yeah. Now, just let everybody go in, but you also need the money. Medical school is very expensive, and there's not a lot of scholarships that cover all of medical school. So I would say you would send people in there, and millions would go in, and only thousands would come out. But guess what? We would only need them because, again, they would be the best of the best. They would be the greatest. We would have people doing it, and again, if we needed people who had less intense jobs. I mean, right now we have EMTs that only take a couple months of training, and nurses and stuff that take a year or so. We would have tons of those people that would come in, do it, and you would have a much better thing, because again, there would be more of them. I really think that there would be more.
So you're telling me that you would have an EMT with a couple of months, or a nurse with a year's experience or knowledge or training give you a diagnosis of cancer, or try and find out if they should send you off to a consultant or not? You say that that's a good system?
I would say that you I would say that we would have more of everybody. We would have more doctors, we would have more nurses, and
but
everything.
You wouldn't. But you wouldn't. You would by decree, as is in trying to name them, but you wouldn't actually have more doctors.
I don't know. Honestly, I think you would. I still think you would. It may be wrong. That may sound ridiculous to you, and I totally understand that.
No. Does that mean that I'm right that a lot of people actually like their jobs then?
Perhaps a lot of doctors. No, it just means that we would need them. I mean,
okay, so they don't like their jobs, they just need them, and that would make them necessarily go into their position. I'm just trying to understand your position here.
No, I'm good. I appreciate this. So, so because not a lot of people like their jobs, we would have, less people doing those shitty jobs. However, the ones that need to get done, we would still make sure that they get done. Like we would still, however, I mean, like if
no, how is the most important? How is the most important? How would you get that done?
A doctor's job?
No, the jobs that you need doing, if people don't want to do them, how would you, as you just said, you would get them done? How would you get them done?
They would be done voluntarily by people who even don't want to do it, but are saying, okay, fine, it needs to be done, I will do it. And then people being, perhaps drafted, and then eventually automated. And then eventually no one has to do it if they don't want to. That's the problem.
They wouldn't necessarily be more then. You're just saying that you're offering them a chance of doing it, but that doesn't mean that they are going to do it.
Yeah, I don't know if there would be more or less. It may come and go, honestly. But we would need people as educators. We would need people as doctors. We would need people as things.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not denying you that one. I'm asking you, in your system, in your ideology, how are you going to get that done? If people don't want to do it, and I'm wrong that people don't like their jobs, then how does it come to a fact of you getting them to do it?
I mean, I imagine a lot of times it is the education barriers that keep them from doing it. I mean, a lot of people perhaps they say, oh, I don't want to go to school for 10 years, but I mean, not every medical job needs 10 years of school, and you can perhaps stop once you've reached a level of education, just do that job that needs to be done for a little while, and then perhaps continue your learning later on and expand later, as people do now. But you wouldn't, again, need to save up money or anything to do it. You would just be doing it for a little while, and your hours would be better because, again, you're not doing it for things. Now, if hours are so long in medical things because we don't have enough people, it may just be because we don't have enough access to education. And in fact, they've done a lot of things to make medical school a lot easier and cheaper for people. They have done a lot of things in order to do that. And I just think that we would have more people talking about it. We say we have a shortage of doctors. We need doctors. Who's able-bodied and do it? Like volunteer. It would be socially encouraged. It would be socially incentivized rather than monetarily.
Sure, but that still doesn't mean that you can get anybody that actually wants to do the job. And even if you do get people that do want to do the job, the numbers in themselves are going to be nowhere near what it would be if you were to be able to incentivize them via monetary gains.
Then we would probably continue to search in other areas to improve, perhaps through automation. We would ask people who are not strictly medically trained or interested in medical technology, but people who make computers and stuff, and say, hey, you guys are good with this stuff. How can you help us? We would appreciate your help as well. And they would try to help too. Other people would try. People would try things that aren't directly related to going and becoming a doctor. People would make becoming a doctor easier. People would make...
Sure. Would you say then that I would be able to ask people that play a violin to work out mathematical problems or scientific problems just because they played violin? Just because something similar doesn't make it the same.
But or even if it's not even similar at all, it doesn't. We might find surprising connections in sort of tangential related things that aren't even related.
So you would put a society and medical needs on the point of we might find something that intrinsically links these two things together because we can't find the right amount of numbers possibly.
Mm. Um, Look, I would say it like this. Yeah, it would be voluntary, and it would be access to everybody, and it would be encouraged. And honestly, I don't see how that wouldn't be enough. And then eventually automated. I really feel like perhaps there might be less for a little while, but because of the need for it to do, and the fact that you don't have to do it, you don't have to make it your career and make it your entire life, just, a good few years. And again, other people would be voluntary and it would be encouraged. I think that would be enough. And I don't see. It sounds perhaps a little counterintuitive, especially because a lot of people don't like the jobs that they do. But again, the jobs that don't like being done have to be done. Would be done and encouraged by voluntary and by perhaps sortition methods until it could be automated away. And eventually, I believe all jobs could be automated away, especially the ones that we don't like to do.
Sure, I think the way that society is going, everything will be automated. Mm-hmm. I do believe that. But at this moment in time, when we're talking about society as is and as now, if we already have doctor shortages all over the world with the incentive of money in this most greedy aspect of capitalist society that you said states that people are going to want to be greedy, then why wouldn't they want to become doctors? Why they're being greedy? And if it's less...
Because there are more easier ways to make more and similar amounts of money. You could become You could become a stockbroker and make millions. You could become
much more risk,
but much less effort. You don't have
not particularly. You have to study the stocks. It's not very often that somebody that doesn't know stocks without an assist of a program is going to do well at stocks. Me or you are not going to be able to put a pound into stocks or a dollar onto stocks and be able to walk away as millionaires eventually.
I mean, if you invested, onto safe things, it would be slow, but you would make a lot of money eventually, especially if you continue to invest. But yeah, it's just like there's other ways to make similar amounts of money and that require less effort and are under less pressure. So people just kind of don't want to do it, but we would make it incentivized. We would give people the opportunity to make mistakes and not be, so things, obviously making mistakes in medical procedures is bad because people die if you make a mistake. Yeah. But we would give people training and stuff and give them the opportunity to make those mistakes and things, and in a school environment. And we would make it, again, we would promote it. We would make it easier for people.
But that's what happens now. That's what happens now with the incentive of capital. My point to you is, again, that even with this incentive greed that you stated at the beginning of the conversation, that people that are naturally greedy, that want this capital, we have doctor shortages now. So why would it be an increase in your society that doesn't incentivize via this greed from capital?
Because I think that it's just like, because people would be incentivized by society's need for it. Now, obviously that we have a shortage now. You're right, but it is not made clear. It has not been, it's not on the news all the time. It's not like we need doctors, please do this. We will give you, like, we're not doing everything we can, whereas we would be doing that in my society.
What would they be giving you? Because you almost let stuff slip there that you would incentivize them via a state. So what would you give them?
Incentivize. No, again, it would be social encouragement. And the reason I said that was because I was talking about now. I'm saying under society now, we're not giving them free, education or bonuses or something like that, and making it very clear all the time. Instead, we're on the news talking about like coronavirus and everything like that, and whatever the topic of the day is.
Sure.
We would continually be doing this. It would be very clear. No one would be able to avoid it. We need doctors all the time.
So you'd be doing a targeted propaganda assessment then?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
But the propaganda would be to get more doctors and more people in the medical field until it is no longer necessary that we need those many people.
Sure. So if they haven't got
it would be beat down people's throats, basically.
Sure. Does that mean that more people would necessarily like it, or would they stay away from it because it's being rammed down their throats?
Some people might be, but I mean, again, it's being rammed down your throat that we need people to save other people's lives. So it's
being rammed down people's throats that you should join the army, and in the UK, it's dwindling in numbers.
Okay, but you're not saving people's lives in the army in the same sense that you're saving.
Some people believe they are. Some people believe that they're saving their lives in the United Kingdom.
Sense. You are in a sense protecting people in a way. but you're also putting your own life in danger, which again you could potentially be doing as a medical person if you're, you know, dealing with a pandemic and stuff like that. But again, it would be propagandized, because again, it would be propagandized, and it would work. I believe it would no, let me rephrase that. It would be encouraged, it would be known, it would be everywhere, and people would come in again until it is no longer necessary. The military always needs new people because people are constantly, I don't know, dying or whatever.
Sure, but no, I agree with you. Yeah. I agree with you. But the point is that I was making with the military is that it is shoved down your throats. In general, at least in the UK, it's on at least twice, maybe 3 times an hour, so to speak, for the UK reserves and RAF reserves. It's on the radio and so on and so forth. But a lot of people are not joining these armed forces anymore. So the point that I'm making is that just because that you're propagandizing it doesn't mean it is going to work.
And if all else fails, if it is beat down people's throats, constantly aware, made every opportunity for people to do it, it would eventually, unfortunately, have to go to a draft. Perhaps like some places have compulsory military service, everybody would have to go to medical school. Perhaps that would have to be it. Perhaps it would come to that. But I don't think that it would ever have to come to it. If it would, that's what we would probably have to do.
If you had similar numbers to what you do now in doctors, would you need to propagandize to get more doctors in, knowing that doctors and nurses are a massive shortage at this minute in time? Hospitals themselves are a massive shortages in everything. And in actual fact, they're short on actual hospital numbers as well. But besides that,
so you're saying if we had now,
if you had the same numbers now, would you use an aggressive advertising campaign, or would you go straight to doing a draft?
I would definitely start with the advertising campaign, especially because we're in a pandemic now, so it's even more reason to do that.
Sure, I would. Sure, but if the numbers were exactly the same and the propagandizing didn't work, if the advertising didn't work,
it's happening right now, so we don't know if it would work or not.
No, I agree, but I'm saying if
we had already tried it.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, then we would have to, I guess, force everybody to go to medical school. I mean, I don't know. That would be the last resort. But I mean, if that's what needs to be done, I mean, that's what would need to be done. I don't think that would ever have to happen, though. But I could be wrong.
So you think in a society that has a moral duty as it does already, as you would claim that it would do in yours, and also has the incentives of capital or monetization, you think that in a society that only has one of these motivations would have more doctors?
Well, again, people would not argue against becoming a doctor because they have another job or something like that. People would be fine. They would have their health and safety anyway, so they might as well do it because they don't have to do anything else. It's not like they could excuse not being a doctor by saying, now they would not, again, unless it was an absolute last resort, be forced to, but they would. I mean, right now people are like, well, I'm a truck driver, you know, I didn't go to school or whatever, you know, it would be too hard for me to become a doctor. Whereas now, you know, you could, in my society, that is now. Whereas in communism, it would be like, look, I mean, why not? At least try. You might as well try.
Sure, and you could have tried, or the trucker could have tried when he was younger. The probably reason why he didn't is because of aptitude. As I was now going to move forward, if we're going to say that that's what you would do, if it gets eventually to the point that you would draft people in, I want to reiterate that because it's an important factor. I know it's not your go-to, but I would like to reiterate that.
Yeah, if you want to go more into that, we could talk about it.
No, it's fine. I understand where draft will go and things like that. But let's go into aptitude. For you to be able to do this with doctors, for instance, would you still have a form of aptitude test to be able to get into being a doctor, or would it just be a blank slate? It doesn't matter. Just come in.
Well, obviously, there would be, how much do you know about medicine already or whatever? You know, it would be like the aptitude test would not be excuse me. You would need to go through medical school, yes, if that's what you're asking. Thank you.
No, I agree. I agree that you'd have to go through medical school. Obviously, anybody would do that, have to want to become a doctor or a nurse or whatever. But my point is, would there be an aptitude test before you even can get into the class?
There would be an aptitude test in the sense of how much do you already know. I mean, yeah, I mean, there would also possibly be records of your education prior, because there would be no reason not to keep them. So if you were coming in with no knowledge, then yeah, you would start from the bottom. And if you came in with some knowledge, you would start somewhere in the middle.
Sure. So if I don't know, Tom Jones decided to come in off of the streets and decided that he was going to apply to become a doctor, and he had literally no aptitude for medicine whatsoever, is there a way of excluding him from doing that? Would you exclude him from doing it, or would you just go, yeah, go on, you get on the course?
Well, did he pass his classes?
What classes?
Medical school.
No, I'm talking about getting into class, not going into being a doctor. Getting into medical class.
Yeah, why would we stop him? I mean, yeah, sure. You go to the very end, you fail, you go back one. You fail, you go back until you can pass, and then you go forward. I don't quite understand the question.
The question is that people have limitations. There are limitations to education, there's a limitation to intelligence. Regardless of anything else, there are limitations to people. There are some people that just will not have the aptitude to become a doctor.
Okay, and then those people would not be able to pass the classes. And then they would.
So say for instance, you've got, I don't know, 20 people that have just applied for the college course, the medical college course, right? And you do the aptitude test and you realize that you've got, I don't know, let's say 15 people that are bone dead stupid, have no idea what they don't even know what a syringe is. That type of level of aptitude. And you've got 5 people that are okay. You've only got 1 teacher. Are you going to exclude any of those 15 people from starting, or are you just going to go, everybody should go into this class and that teacher should focus on everybody and not help the other 5?
Okay, so let's say somebody stopped going to school at 12 and they just did not go to school after that until this medical shortage comes in. And a bunch of people did that. Yeah, you're right. Look, there would be, they would fail. They would have to go back to a different class and get to that point where they were ready, if they wanted to. They would have the opportunity to keep going, and they would be encouraged to try again. They would not be forced in the class unless, again, we came to the draft or something like that. But again, assuming there's no draft, assuming it is entirely voluntary, you would be encouraged to keep trying until you did it and learn from your mistakes. And going to a lower level class if that was necessary.
Okay, so what does that do for the teachers then? Because the teachers are going to obviously be torn from helping the people that are at the top of the class and the people at the bottom of the class. And a teacher can only give so much time in the day to individual students.
There would be different levels for teachers. Like they would have different levels. And of course, you could also have doctors who work potentially do teaching on their time off as well. You know, like we would encourage the teachers just in the same way that we encourage the medical people. You know, like you would learn. I mean, again, medical school is not one thing. There's like hundreds of different aspects of it. So you're right. You need a lot of different teachers to have different specializations and stuff like that. You would have people at the bottom. We would have the great people at the bottom, like the great number of people at the bottom. Some would pass. A lot would probably fail, and then a lot would come back in and try again and keep going, and that they would probably get the same teachers over and over again teaching the same things. And sure. Yeah. So are you implying that there would be a shortage of teachers as well?
No, well, in essence, yes, because you would only have a certain amount of teachers that would only be able to teach a certain amount of students, because that's just the way that teaching goes. But more importantly, if you have instead, if you had an aptitude test and you actually had 20 people that actually had the aptitude of doing the course, you would have a much higher percentage of people that were passing. But because you've excluded the application or the aptitude test, you're in essence, for lack of a better term, wasting the teacher's time.
Yeah, no, okay. I think I wasn't clear then. Yeah, you would have an aptitude test that places you in the appropriate education level. You would take a test that asks how much you know about whatever. If you don't understand what a syringe is, you would be at the bottom. If you know about how to do a colonoscopy or something like that, you would be put towards the top. And then another thing would be as well, another thing to take the burden off the teachers is classes could be recorded, and you could watch videos and have people watch video classes, take classes at home and things like that, and then be able to email the teacher if they have questions and things like that, be able to do that. They wouldn't necessarily be live lessons in a classroom. If that was a difficulty, you could do it from home if that was a possibility. It would be, we would use every resource that we could to make it as simple and easy and streamlined for as many people as possible, including the teachers, including the doctors, and everybody else.
Sure, but even with that being as streamlined as possible, you would still have people that would never pass, and always would be, in essence, again, wasting the teacher's time, because you wouldn't have the right tests for the right people to, as they do now, exclude people because of their intelligence level. Or aptitude level,
their knowledge level, yeah. And I kind of said that I did have those. We had aptitude tests that put you in where you
bottom classes. That still means that a teacher is wasted teaching people the most basics of stuff when they're just, some of them are just never going to pass.
I mean, if you tried 5 or 6 times and you couldn't get it, then I mean, you tried 5 or 6 times and you couldn't get it. Perhaps you're useful somewhere else.
Yeah, but that's the point I'm making. That even if you are at that point useless and more useful somewhere else, you've already wasted that person's time for at least 6 years, 5 years. The teachers, not that person.
There would be different teachers for different levels, though. I don't fully
agree. I know. I'm with you. I understand that there would be different teachers for different levels. But if you have a BTEC entry level 1 or any sort of foundation, or what's the post? Is it postgrad the most lowest level for university?
No, it would probably be pre-grad. It would be
pre-grad. Yeah, pre-grad. Whatever. The first level of university. If you have those levels, then the teachers know what you're already doing and what you're capable of. Where if you have even an aptitude test, as you said before, you would have the basic teachers that would be able to teach those basic things.
Yeah.
But instead, you're having a teacher that is trained as a doctor or knows a lot about medicine, teaching people that have no knowledge whatsoever about it.
No, it would be similar. It's just that, like, you would take the test. You would say, look, I want to become a doctor. All right, how much do you know about doctoring? And then they would say, okay, you know nothing. Okay, we'll start you from the bottom. And if you know everything, we'll start you from the top. I don't understand the issue.
That some people are not going to get past the bottom.
Okay, yeah. Well, encourage them as much as they can, and if they truly do not possess the capabilities, then then they don't have to keep trying anymore. I don't know. We still need doctors. They will still see the advertising, and you know what? Maybe they'll be encouraged to do it, or maybe they'll do something else.
How big are the classes going to be? That's my basic point. If you have set number of classes and set number of teachers, the teachers that are wasting their time teaching the people that have no aptitude whatsoever to do this are wasting their time in teaching them. Whatever level you're at and whatever level the teacher is at are going to be wasted teaching these people, simply because they will never have the aptitude.
Concentrated at the bottom, though. It wouldn't happen beyond the bottom, because if the people, I mean, obviously there would be people who fail out of stuff and have to try again. But it's like, again, the classrooms could be unlimited size, because it could just be recorded videos that people are watching, and then they could email their professor for questions, or they could have live, like, Zoom classes in addition.
Sure, but there's only so many times that a teacher can answer somebody, even on email. There's only so many minutes in a day.
I really feel like I don't.
I'm talking about the limitation of humanity, the limitation of humans. There are limitations to them in general. The aptitude, the amount of times that you can teach somebody properly, the amount of times that you're able to interact with people properly. If you interact with me and I don't really have an idea of what sociology is or anything else like that, and I start talking about the idea of is this version of nature versus nurture correct? And I don't have a fucking clue about what nature is or what nurture is in that context, then I'm never going to be able to understand it. But I'm going to need that teacher to explain what the context is. And if they can't do that in that sort of time, it's a waste.
Okay. So, all right. So Kayla asks an important question. I mean, this might help. It might not. If a high school student drops out, did their elementary school teachers waste their time teaching them? Is that what you would feel?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so. I was just making sure. What you're saying is, look, a student comes into a class and doesn't understand nature versus nurture, then they would go to a lower class.
Sure, but they would still have to end up understanding what nature versus nurture is.
Yeah.
My point is, some people
are never teaches them that.
Sure, but my point is that some people are never going to have the aptitude to truly grasp what that is. And that would be a waste of the teacher's time. And that's why we have a grading system.
But we still do. We would still have a grading system under this too. I don't. I still.
You said that you don't. You said that you have an aptitude test
to find out where you
should be open to people. Yeah, and you saying that from every single foundation level all the way to the top that you would have teachers there, and yet somehow these teachers are just going to magically poof out of existence.
No, you would be graded. It would be the same as classes. I mean, it might be slightly different if we find a better teaching methods, but it would be similar to how it is now. It's just that you wouldn't have to pay to do it. And you would go where your level is. And if you cannot grasp the material and you've tried your hardest and you really want to, you ask questions, then I guess you would have tried and then you're done. You gave it a shot. And you gave it several shots, perhaps. You've gone back and gone to easier material, and you've had trouble with that, and you couldn't do it. And you passed that class, but you just can't pass this one. You've done it 5 times. You understand what's below it. You've gotten an A+ or whatever, a 10 out of 10, and you go to this one, and you just can't make 3. You can't get past an F.
That's not going to happen, though. That's not going to happen. My point is that if you get to a point of where you're just passing the other course and then you're getting into the other one, or you've just got enough to just pass that course and whatnot, then sure, you're going to be able to go into the other class. The reason why we have a grading system and aptitude test in that aspect is that if you have 2 A levels and you go into doing a university level or whatever the equivalence is, then you normally the people normally have an aptitude to realize that you're good at doing this, you're good at doing that. We see that you have effort of doing this and doing that. But if you're just opening up, if you want to become a doctor, start right at the beginning, then if you're starting back at, say, kindergarten level, you've got 20 years before that person, if they pass every course year by year, before they become a doctor.
Okay, so how is it different than just the A levels thing? I mean, like, they've already got the education so far. You just put them where their next place would be. You don't need to.
But my point is that if you got started from the beginning, if you have no aptitude, it would take you 20 years for you to get there.
Yeah, but most people wouldn't take that long. Some people would. But most people
are still going to take 10 years. Most people, on average, are going to take 10 years to do it. But again, that's including people that have mid-level aptitude. Me, myself, I know my limitations. I know that I wouldn't be able to pass medical school. I know I wouldn't. But if I was to go and I was to apply, I may at some time fluke a test and be able to get through. That means that my grading level is nowhere near somebody that's just passed it straight off, because they know more than I do, because they've easily passed. I may have just fluked it, because I've got the ability to take it 3 or 4 times on the trot.
Okay, but you've learned from those 3 or 4 times that you failed.
Yeah. That doesn't mean that I have the aptitude to become a doctor. That just means that the questions lined up for me to be able to pass.
I don't think you can fluke all through medical school. That would be pretty crazy. If you could just pass, that sounds like a sitcom. Like somebody who just, he stumbled through medical school. He thought he was in band class and he was in medical school and now he's a doctor. Like what? That sounds crazy. That's ridiculous. Like I don't quite.
That's not.
I must be missing something, because I really don't understand what you're asking, because it's not. It would be exactly the same as it is now.
Curriculum. If the curriculum, let me explain it. If the curriculum is the same, let me explain it. If the curriculum is the same, and I'm able to take it 4 to 5 times, so 4 to 5 years, and the curriculum doesn't change, guess what I can do?
What?
I can remember the test results and I can remember what I need to do as part of my coursework and what I needed to do to change it. That doesn't mean I know what I'm doing. It means that I can change what I needed to do.
I mean, that's basically what learning is, though. I mean, like,
no, it's not. Learning doesn't mean that you learn.
Memorizing multiple choice answers is one thing, but I don't think you could do that until I don't think you could just memorize multiple choice answers all the way through medical school for 10 years.
It's not memorizing them in that instance. It's a case of just the test results. A lot of people are going, oh, that's what learning is. No, remembering something because you can remember it. If I can remember how to spell they and They, that doesn't mean that I actually know how to spell it. That doesn't mean I can use the process of working out how the letters are formed to be able to spell the word.
Okay, I think I kind of understand what you're saying. But maybe I don't know. It sounds with your example of like if I could learn how to put a computer together without understanding what the parts do, right? Is that sort of what you're saying?
Exactly that. Yes.
Yes. Okay. I don't think that really works with medical school. I think that might get you halfway there, and then you wouldn't be able to do it. And then I guess what you're saying is then all that time is wasted. But I don't think all that time is wasted because, again, you could. I feel like it's just.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Let's just move on.
Yeah. I think what you're describing would be, just not as much of a problem as it might sound like it is. Perhaps, I don't know. But it was an interesting idea. Anyway, we've been doing this for about 3 hours.
Sure.
Unless you have anything else that you would like to ask or come up with, I think that we might be able to just call it quits.
What's your take on the movement, not the notion, the movement of Black Lives Matter?
Well, I think that is an interesting question because it's difficult to divorce the idea behind the movement. If you're asking if I justify certain riots, then is that what you're asking? If I justify the behavior of everybody? I mean, of course I can't get behind the behavior of everybody. Just because I agree with their ideas doesn't mean I agree with their methods. But I also don't think that rioting is inherently a bad thing. I mean, if people are being oppressed and have been oppressed for many, many years, generations, and police brutality is a huge problem. I mean, and we're not being heard, and the police are not being defunded. Then it sounds like we need to get louder and more rambunctious, to put it lightly. Yeah.
Do you think that if the riots would have happened in Minnesota, for instance, after unfortunately George Floyd was murdered, do you think that if the riots happened as they did,
do you have a specific riot that you're referring to?
When they started to burn down the police station, literally like 3 days afterwards.
It sounds like they were perhaps may have been a bit hasty, but it seems like there was probably a lot of underlying issues, and it was finally the straw that broke the camel's back. I mean, Black Lives Matter was a movement back when Obama was president, and then it kind of died down. Resurgent. I'm sure. I know you know. I'm just saying. It's kind of perhaps just been boiling under the surface so long that people are they've just been wanting an outlet, and they finally got the opportunity to do it, and perhaps they took things a little too far. Or maybe, I mean, goddamn, I mean, like, maybe the police should have fixed. Yeah, these problems should have been fixed before George Floyd was murdered, and they weren't.
I agree. No, I agree with you completely on that. Apart from maybe the rioting, because my point wasn't going to be, do you think they did it a good or a bad thing? My actual point was going to be, do you think that with the first couple of days, with the literal outrage that was coming from all political sides about what the police appeared to have done and did do to George Floyd, there was so many people on all sides of the political spectrum that was going, we need to do something. And unfortunately, due to the burning down of the police station, a lot of people that were having voices about we need to do something about the police then went, we need the police because these people are out of control. And to me, it seemed counterproductive because the conversation that they wanted to have was starting to be happening on all sides of the political spectrum, and now is dissipated.
Well, I'd say, yeah. So okay. So the police station gets burned down, and now people are able to commit crimes a lot more easily because the police are inhibited from doing their job. Yeah, that's pretty awful, but it's kind of just. I mean, it shows that it should have been handled already, and it shouldn't have gotten to this point in the first place.
No, that's not what my point was. That wasn't what my question was.
Okay.
My question was, do you think that because of the riots, the conversation from all political sides, which any society that is...
Oh, do I think riots are inhibiting the progression?
The conversation that needs to happen, yes. The conversation that obviously needed to happen.
Yeah. I mean, perhaps they might have set it back a little bit, but I think overall, it's not that big of an issue. I think that.
I think you're massively underestimating. Sorry, the fact of how so many people are looking at Portland, for instance, and seeing that they've been rioting for 90 odd days on the trot.
Yeah, but I mean, have you seen? I mean, they've been captured by essentially secret police in Portland.
No, the feds were brought in to stop people from going from people that have been caught instigating stuff.
They've been put in unmarked vans without.
Yes, the feds don't need to be marked.
But people need to be charged with a crime. They were taken without being charged. They've just
your Miranda rights. Your Miranda rights have a limitation of 24 hours. They can hold you without giving you Miranda rights for 24 hours. After that, it's a breach of federal law.
Well, I think that even that is ridiculous. But again,
fine, that's a different argument, though, to what's happened. They haven't broken any law.
I mean, so are you asked? Well, yeah. So succinctly, you're saying that perhaps are you asking if I think that the riots have gone too far?
No, I'm trying to ask you if you think that what they've done as a movement, not as a notion, but as a movement, has been taken over and has destroyed, for me, any sort of point of equality that could come from a conversation of defunding the police or talking about police brutality.
No, I think that honestly, I mean, you're from England, so this isn't necessarily a great example, but I mean, sometimes violent revolution needs to happen. Obviously, it's not the #1 priority, but I mean, if getting violent is the only way to
but it wasn't. That's my point.
I mean, but why did nothing happen, and why has nothing happened then? I mean,
I never said that you shouldn't protest. The protests were fine. People were listening to the protests. They were taking knees all over the world. That people wanted the conversation everywhere. But then people started to riot.
I think that even so, you said people are taking knees over everywhere, but nobody was doing anything about it. The police were not.
The conversations were happening. Police were saying we need to have a conversation about it.
I mean, they've been protesting since Obama, since before that even. I mean, they've been protesting peacefully for so long. It really,
sure, but most people saw what happened to George Floyd as the catalyst for what should have been done beforehand. I'm not arguing with you that it should have not been done earlier. It should have been done. But what happened to George Floyd was the catalyst. Because of what's happened afterwards with the riots, people that were seeing what happened to George Floyd were with you and wanted everything to be changed the same as it should be. But now because of the riots, people that were with you are now against you because of the riots.
I mean, my personal view is that, I mean, the riots are happening because, goddamn, I mean, why did we need George Floyd to die? We had Trayvon Martin die. We had so many people die. We had Breonna Taylor. Like, why is it so, like, why was his death the one that was going to do it? Oh, if we had just waited.
Do you know why? No, do you know why the George Floyd was such an important thing? Because nobody could have a different opinion of what happened. They saw They saw Derek Chauvin with the knee on the back, saw him calling out, almost crying, wet himself, and all that type of stuff, as you would do if you were scared for dying.
Still have dissenting opinions. People still...
Not on George Floyd, not the majority. Most people that will talk about George Floyd will say, yeah, there was stuff that happened, but it was still brutal for the police to do that and for the technique. There will be people that try to defend it and say different things, but most people will say, no, that was the point where we had the opportunity to change the police.
Then it sounds like we still have that opportunity, regardless of the riots. I think the riots are just showing how much it needs to happen and how little has been done about it.
I disagree, simply because I would imagine that most people that have been involved in the riots or see the riots don't want them to come to their area and are happy for the police to have more money to make sure that they don't come into their area.
Well, again, if the police... I mean, I can say this. I can't condone every single action, but I don't think it's as bad. I think, look, it should have been handled before. I mean, this is like I mean, I don't want to sound like the Joker, but you get what you deserve. They hadn't done it. If it really took, I mean, if it really took an unequivocal thing, like I mean, all of those things should have been. It should have been done. It should have been done by now. The riot should have never happened because it should have been handled earlier. I don't care if the people who were pushing it and making it last long were the problem. And they're going to say what they're going to say no matter what. People, like you said, a lot more people are on our side with George Floyd, but there are still dissenting opinions. There are going to be people in power who don't want change and want the status quo continued, and they're going to do everything they can to put a stop to it. And if they need to be roughed up violently and scared, then perhaps that's what they need.
Do you realize what you just endorsed?
I'm saying,
do you realize what you just endorsed? You literally just endorsed political violence. If they need to be persuaded to our form, then it's okay to physically beat them.
They've been able to kill us. They've been killing people
No. This is people. We're not talking about the police.
Mm-hmm.
We're not talking about the police. We're not talking about the feds. We're talking about people that are literally having their livelihoods being burned down to the ground, and you're sitting there saying that it's okay for them to be roughed up.
That's why I'm specific. I didn't know that. I thought you said the police station got burned down. That's
in that one instance. I was talking about specifically afterwards.
I do not condone attacking small businesses. I do not condone attacking people's houses. I do not condone attacking random people on the street. Again, except for possible extenuating circumstances of self-defense or something. Look, I do not condone small business attacks. I do not condone those things. I do not. If you want to give me specific examples, I can give you yay or nay on my opinion.
If you just said what you said, that's absolutely fine. I don't need to go through literally. Do you agree with this? Do you agree with that? I can see your position. I'm not trying to be the stereotypical right-wing person. He's like, you're just against. I'm not. That's not
I
me.
appreciate that. Yeah. So does that clarify things?
No, I'm with you. But if you're saying that even with the idea of, you understand what terrorism is?
Yes.
Define terrorism for me, because a lot of people don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine terrorism is creating like violent acts for a political purpose to get, to convey a message or to cause fear.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the correct definition. I mean, it's not quote by quote, but it's good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think then by that definition that what you've just said is something that's equivalent?
I think if you want to commit the terrorist act of setting fire to a police station because you have been protesting for months and years and possibly even generations, and you have not been heard, and it's not been done, even though they tell you to do it this way, and you've been doing it the way they said, and it's not working, then terrorism, perhaps definitionally, is what needs to be done. If you need to set fire to a police station, hopefully not hurting anybody, but proving that you're serious, showing that you mean what you're saying. I mean, that's how America became an independent country. We had a revolution.
Yeah, revolution is not the same as terrorism.
But it starts with terrorism.
It depends. It depends on how organic it is.
I mean, you could argue that the Boston Tea Party was an act of terrorism. It's a pretty benign act of terrorism, but it was an act of political violence against.
I would say it's political. I would say it's political vandalism. I wouldn't say, but anyway, besides the point.
Yeah.
The reason why I bring that up is because if you're willing to give the definition of terrorism, and then also at the same time willing to say that you're willing to fight using terroristic tactics, then aren't you by definition then a terrorist organization? And I'm not trying to play to a right-wing ideology.
I'm glad we're having a good faith discussion. They will say that. I mean, definitionally, yeah. If I was, I mean, you could have eco-terrorists who blow up, oil facilities and stuff that are doing things. Like if the only way to get their attention and get the change that we need is, I mean, look, Thomas Jefferson's quote is that, I mean, again, it doesn't fit perfectly, but it's sort of the standard that I hold it to, is that the tree of liberty must occasionally be watered with the blood of patriots and tyrants. If violence is necessary to prevent future violence, then that violence could be justified. Not
could be, yes. Would you say that this is?
What is? We have to be more specific. The burning of a police station? Sure.
In general, just terrorism in itself at this minute in time. Burning down the police stations, going after federal buildings, anything to do with governmental buildings. We won't even talk about the public buildings.
Yeah. I mean, if they have not been listening to us peacefully protest for years, and it's had a resurgence, and George Floyd was there, and it was having a conversation, but nothing had been done yet, then yes, we will prove that we are serious. I mean, again, there might be better methods than are being had. I don't know, but look, I cannot disown completely. I could disavow certain things if I was given.
I'm not asking you to disavow. I'm not asking you to disavow. I'm asking you, do you think it's a form of terrorism?
Yes.
It doesn't mean that you condone it or whatever.
Yeah. It yes, I could definitely see it being under the definition of terrorism. Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't view that as inherently a bad thing, because again, I don't know what the positive word is, but I mean patriotism, I guess, would be the other. Like again, you're freedom fighting. What you're doing is attacking an institution that is oppressing people, and you're committing violence against it. You are bringing terror to those people. You are making them feel scared. That is terrorism. And you know what? Sometimes terrorism is terrible. Sometimes terrorism is okay, if that is the definition that we're using. Now, again,
no, that is the definition. Not the definition we're using. That is the definition.
Yeah, that is the definition. So yeah. So again, I mean, that is not a great soundbite to have that somebody could eventually clip me saying, but I mean, it is what it is. Politics is violence. I mean, the state has a monopoly on violence, and if they're using it improperly, they need to be defended against, and violence can be met with violence.
I've never understood that. Politics is violence. Does that mean even your ideology of syndicalism is a form of politics? So does that mean that that's violence?
It's usually in the sense that politics has the monopoly on violence is the issue, and that you can use politics to commit direct violence against people or indirect violence against people. It's basically, it's force. Politics is force, and violence is force. That's sort of what they're saying. Does that help?
So does that mean in your syndicalism ideology that you would have the power of force, which means politics is violence?
We would have, the thing is, it would be democratically persuaded. So it would be
government.
Yeah, but direct democracy, it is not. It is, if anything,
it doesn't matter. It's still a form of democracy. Even direct democracy would still be a form of violence, because you still have the people that wouldn't have voted for you.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, you could say that, but it's just, it would be like, it's like saying that, yes, it's violence to cut somebody in line, and it's also violence to punch somebody in the face. Like, it's a different form of violence. It's just, you could technically categorize it as violence if you wanted to, but I would consider them to be very different things.
Yeah, well, that's the reason why I would say politics is violent and political violence is good. As I wouldn't say that that's a mantra to live by.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But you know what? I mean, if it works, it works. You know, and if it no longer serves us, then we should move on to something else.
Well, would you agree then with Alexandra's next point, which is political action is strictly violence? Does that mean any politics and any political action is always going to be violent, regardless of what the ideology is?
It is backed by violence. It is enforced by violence. Even if
so, in other words, we shouldn't have politics at all then? Or is it just the violence that we choose as acceptable?
I believe it is the second option. Yeah, the latter.
But doesn't that mean that everybody has a different selection of what violence is acceptable? I don't agree with terrorism in any sense of the word, but you do. Who's right? Who's wrong?
Let democracy decide. And history. Yeah.
Sure. Does that mean that Al-Qaeda's, or I'm using it on purpose? I'm not trying to be a dick. I'm using it on purpose.
I was waiting for that, honestly. Well, it really depends because, again, if they view themselves as under attack of the political violence and war of the, United States, and they are viewing it as defending themselves, I could see why they're arguing it. But, that doesn't mean bomb a hospital. If they, do something like that's not acceptable.
Sure, but their point generally, though there are different, obviously, versions of it, and I'm not saying it's a mantra of as the whole collective, but most of Al-Qaeda and those types of people normally have the idea of we are Muslim, we are Islam, and we are going to adhere to the actual point and mantra of fighting the West and converting the infidel or kill them.
I would say yes. Education over oppression. I would say education before violence. And if let's say, I mean, so in their book, I guess it says to commit war with people. I don't know for sure if that's...
No, it does definitely. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Then I would personally disagree with that, and I think that it really is a matter of perspective, but it doesn't make everything okay under a certain light. Even, I mean, obviously murder could be justifiable if you're murdering someone like Hitler or something like that. But
would you kill Hitler as a baby?
Probably not as a baby, no.
Okay.
Yeah. That's always been kind of a weird thing for me. I understand the idea of it, but I would probably... if I were to go back in time, I would probably try to affect it in a different way. But I don't know.
That's fair enough.
Yeah,
no, that's fair enough. I mean, isn't that what we should all be trying to do in that aspect then, that violence doesn't necessarily mean that you'd be able to change the future? Because there could always be another Hitler rather than it being Hitler, and it could actually have been even worse.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that the idea is to use violence only as absolutely necessary, as a last resort, after everything else has been tried. But I don't...
Do you think everything else has been tried with George Floyd then, and the instance of police reform? Because the reason why I asked that is because in most places that have had the riots, so to speak, or the very large protests, most of them have been in Democrat-held cities and been in there for a long time. Now, I'm not going to go down the road of going, well, the Democrats let them burn. No, it's a case of, if you're saying that they're not listening to you in these cities, then the Democrats that are in power, aren't they the ones to blame?
Yeah. I mean, the people in power, whether they be Democrat, Republican, or even third party, if they're in charge, they're allowing this oppression, then they're to blame. They should be doing whatever they can to fix the situation and to reduce the violence and to reduce the militarization of the police and increase mental health services, because, again, police should not be answering calls of suicide.
I agree.
Yeah.
That is, before we go any further, the reason why I'm like I am is I've always said, and I stated when this happened at the beginning, I'm with the idea of police reform. I think that your American police in general need more training in de-escalation tactics. They need more training in working out who, what, where, and what's going on, and just general de-escalation techniques. I do think that they do have a dangerous job. I'm not going to go down that road. There are a lot of good cops. There are a lot of good cops. There are a lot of bad cops, but there are a lot of good ones.
The way that you go forward is you don't use the police as a stopgap for everything.
All right,
because,
exactly.
Because if you're going to do stuff like that, then what you should do is have the city pay for the police themselves rather than being federally subsidized. And with that federal subsidization that was being given to the cities, put more into mental health and into other aspects.
I don't have a problem with it being federally funded as long as it's federally funded ethically and appropriately. I mean, maybe it'd be better to have it as a city, as you said, but I think we should adopt a similar system to what you have, where the police don't carry guns, they don't answer suicide things, and if a gun is necessary, that's what we have the SWAT team for. And if we need the military, we have the National Guard. We don't need to give tanks and APCs, armored personnel vehicles or carriers, to the police. We have the military.
I mean, I would disagree. I would say that the police do need to need guns in your they do need firearms in our area, but definitely in yours. I would say that they need more training with tasers and using tasers as a first port of call rather than it being straight drawn to a pistol. I would like to see that brought out even down to a state trooper level rather than it just being major metropolises. So using a taser would be a lot better for people.
Like riot, like non-lethal, like not permanent damage causing sound weapons might be nice, like to hit people with like a high-pitched noise or like a low frequency that causes them to kind of disable or sort of, I don't know, the non-lethal methods of de-escalation. I agree.
No, I agree with that. There definitely should be more research into try and find out more ways of doing that. Also, as well, the most biggest thing that needs to be done with America is prison reform.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed there too as well. And yet, even with the political violence and the violence against the stations, and before that, it was not happening, and it still seems to not really be a big thing. Now, I guess Biden perhaps might be open to it as well, but I don't see it. As far as I know, he has no plans of doing anything like that. No. So I don't see why the violence will get any less. I feel like it will only escalate because these are reasonable things to ask that are not being granted.
I mean, the most easiest things for the idea of prison reform would be a form of not even changing necessarily the prison system itself. Now, I do agree that it does need to be changed, but the most easiest thing that you could do to change it with little funding is add a way of free education when you're in there, or a version of free education.
As well as mental health services.
As well as mental health and addiction services.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. And I mean, and also better conditions too. You shouldn't have like 4 people in a small 8x8 room with like 4 beds and a bunk bed and like one and a barred up window. I mean, they need more community, like opportunities for going outside but not outside of the jail necessarily. But I like how Finland does it, where they're not really jails, they're just rehabs.
Yeah, anyway, before I go into that one, I do agree with you in essence. I do think that your low-level offenders need to be treated more like human beings. People that have the mental health conditions need to go to mental health institutions rather than being held in a maximum security prison. They need a different form of looking after, for lack of a better term. And as you quite rightly said, if you were able to get rid of the most mentally challenged, if I can use that as a word, people out of the prison, then most of the time the lifers would be moved into an institution of mental health that would help them a lot better than what it would be taking up time, money, effort in the prison services, just going to let them rot.
Yeah. I'm glad we agree on that. And I'm glad that you understand or you see the point of de-escalating military things as well. I think we agree on a lot more of this than we disagree on, and perhaps the fine, minute details of how far or in what way we might, disagree. But that is what democracy is for,
Exactly.
We can try. Yeah. So yeah. Is there anything else? Should we sum up sort of what we said?
I just want to ask people. So, how is it actually talking to a right-winger instead of actually just trying to meme over them? Because I have the same problem when I have right-wingers try and talk to other left-wingers. So it's not always a one-way street. So I do get that. But you do see that when we actually talk openly and have, as you said before, an honest discussion, we tend to agree
more on situations than we would disagree on. We disagree mostly on the fundamentals rather than the foundation.
Yeah, I think that would be good. And but also, I mean, it is something to be said. I've called you a right winger in the title, as we agreed to, but you're not someone I would consider to be a right winger. I would consider you to be much more centrist than anything else. That's my view of you. But you know, if the right's gonna call us on the left centrist socialists, then I might as well do the same thing, right? Anything?
Yeah, why not?
It's a right winger, right? All right. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, Jason, Mr. Common Sense Guy. I will pin a comment with your information if anyone feels interested to follow you. Though I think most of the audience was your audience anyway, so it is what it is. But you will, if anyone finds this video 10 years from now and would like to check him out, I will make it available.
We don't need to wait 10 years. Smiley's a good lad. He's got his head on. It's just a case of he needs to understand what private property is, and then we'll be fine.
There we go. Wouldn't it all be great? It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.